Hey guys. So we are going to continue with the depositions from the Afroman case. I was going to do other stuff today. I wanted to talk about another case, come back to the Afroman case another day or later on. And then I took a sneak peek to try to prepare a thumbnail and just find a little soundbite from the deposition. And I saw something in this deposition that really pissed me off. So we're just going to go into this. We're going to keep going today because I can't wait for you guys to see what I'm talking about. So this one, it's like 40 something pages. Shawn Cooley. This is the guy that was named Lemon Pound Cake, if you didn't already know. We're going to read the whole deposition. You guys will know when we get to the part. Also, quick housekeeping. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be joining with Judy and the Loophole Lawyer over at AA Legal Focus. We're going to be talking about this trial. So make sure you check that out. It's pinned in the chat right now. So take a second to hit that notify me button and come hang out with us tomorrow. It's going to be a great time. And now this deposition, which is also going to be another great time of sorts. This is going back to August 6th of 2025. So, what was that, like 8 months ago? And we already looked at a few depositions. We looked at 2 depositions from Afroman. We looked at Justin Cooley, Shawn Cooley's son, so Pound Cake Jr., his deposition yesterday, as well as Michael Estep. Those are linked in the description if you want to catch up on those. This video, we're going to get all the way through Shawn's, and we might continue with the remaining officers. So here we go. Let's see who was present for this. So you still have Robert Klingler, who's like the main attorney for the plaintiffs, and then David Mosier, who's the attorney for the plaintiffs for the counterclaim. And then you have David Osborne for Afroman. Also sitting in, you have Afroman, you have Michael Estep, you have Sean Grooms, Lisa Phillip, and Brian Newland still in the room while this deposition's taking place. So, this is questioning by David Osborne as if it's cross-examination. Shawn Cooley is sworn in, Kat. Can you please state your name for the record? And he says Shawn. He doesn't say Lemon Pound Cake. So he says Shawn D. Cooley. He says, okay, do you mind if I call you Shawn during this deposition? Go right ahead. Shawn, you heard the instructions I gave Justin Cooley. Do you have any questions about those instructions? Well, I wasn't here at the beginning of his deposition. Okay, let me recap them. So have you ever had your deposition taken before? Yes. Okay, I imagine in that situation, the attorney gave you some rules to follow, such as we're recording, we only do verbal answers like yes or no, not nodding of the head or shaking of the head, and Cooley says correct. Okay, one of the other things we ask is, if you don't understand a question, please stop me and ask me to reword it. I think you saw Justin do that a couple of times. Yes. The idea is, if you answer a question, we assume you understood it. Further, if you need to take a break, please ask us. The only thing we do is, I think we all have the same policy where we'd like to have that question answered. So if I ask you what color the sky is, and you want to take a break, unless you're talking to your attorney for some reason, we'd ask that you finish it. Yes. Do you have any questions about that? No, sir. Okay, so how are you employed, Shawn? With the Adams County Sheriff's Office. How long have you been with them? Well, I've been with them twice. I retired in 2014 and then came back. I'm not sure what date that was. Do you know the year? No, to be honest with you. I worked part-time for them for a while and then went full-time with them and then back to part-time when they got more help. So I just kind of did what they needed done as far as manpower was concerned. So you were back through working for them during the execution of the search warrant in 2022? Okay, I was, yes. Okay, were you part-time or full-time in 2022? That I couldn't answer. I don't know. Would there be records to indicate that? Payroll records, yes. He says, and so you mentioned you retired in 2014. How many years? Well, had all of your time with law enforcement in 2024 when you retired, had that been with the Adams County Sheriff's Office? No, sir, it was not. Okay, so how many years total have you been a law enforcement officer? This is 41. Okay, and how many of that with the Adams County Sheriff's Office? It'd be hard to say, probably mid-30s or more. Says, okay, so the other, I'm going to just say 10 years because that would be 31 out of 40. Uh-huh. So for the other roughly 10 years, which other law enforcement agencies did you work for? I worked for the village of New Boston for 6 or 8 months. They have a New Boston over here in Ohio. He says, okay. Transferred from there to the village of Peebles. Okay. Left there and went to Manchester, where I become the chief of police in Manchester. I'm going to ask you to clarify on that one because Manchester sometimes has a police department and sometimes doesn't. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but when I left, we had a full-time police department. Okay, do you remember when that was? It would have been in late 92. Okay, and after Manchester, where did you move? The sheriff's office. I was recruited by then Sheriff Bob Johnson. And prior to working for New Boston, was that your first job out of the academy? My first paying job, yeah. I was what they considered it a special deputy, just like a trainee. Some details you got paid for, some you didn't. Do you remember what academy you went to get your certification? I went to the New Boston Police Academy. And do you remember about the year you graduated and got certified? No, I don't. Would it have been around 1990? Oh, no. It would have been in the 80s. As of today, are you a duly authorized and licensed peace officer in the state of Ohio? I am. Do you have to complete any continuing education as part of your job duties? Yes, sir. Can you tell me about your continuing education? Well, it depends. The Attorney General's office sets the mandated amount of hours that we have to do for continuing ed. I believe last year it was 24 hours. Now, is that 24 per year? Last year it was. This year it could be 24. It could be 50. It depends on the Attorney General. And let me move this, get you guys up on the screen. That way replay crew can be a part of the conversation. And when you take continuing education, what is a standard continuing education like? Well, it's done on a computer. It just depends. They set a list of different classes that you have to take for that year. It could be domestic violence. It could be anything. It could be domestic violence, writing a vehicle incident report. Exactly. Search and seizure, probable cause. It varies from year to year. And that's set by the AG's office? It is, yes. And this may sound stupid, but I guess you don't comply and complete those 24 hours for last year, you wouldn't be certified this year. Yeah, they take your certificate. This may also sound stupid. Is there a record of the classes everybody takes as continuing education? Yes, there is. Where is that record at? Well, there's a record kept at the Attorney General's office, as well as in our personnel files. We have to print off certificates for every class we take, and that's maintained by the sheriff. Now, when you say these are maintained by the AG's office, the Ohio Attorney General has a law enforcement database. Is that what you're referring to? No, well, you'd be considered or talk about a data, but this would be like a criminal history thing for people. It's just like continuing ed through APOTA, which is the Ohio Peace Officers Training Academy. One of their officers maintains the records of this training that you've taken and make sure that every officer is up to date on that. Have you ever, well, I imagine you have to, after 41 years, you had to work with a confidential informant at least once? Yeah, once, multiple times. So there's this packet that just in. I'm going to denote you both by your first, where if I said Mr. Cooley, it would be confusing. Absolutely, go ahead. So Justin spoke about a confidential informant packet. Can you tell me more about that? Well, that came along after I retired. So after 2014? Yeah, that wasn't... I don't use confidential informants. I don't work narcotic cases. So this packet that he's referring to, I've seen them, but I have no idea what they consist of. So you haven't used a confidential informant since prior to 2014? Well, I wouldn't say that. I've used informants, but it's nothing where you would really consider where they're going in and buying drugs, saying you have to show that that they're trustworthy, this, that, and the other. Okay, Shawn, I'm going to ask some stupid questions. I don't mean to be obstinate about them, but what's the difference between an informant and a confidential informant? Because I'm confused on that. And remember, David Osborne used to be a prosecutor. Well, an informant would be something like, let's say I'm looking for a stolen camping trailer, which is what I just did this morning. Somebody will come up and say, hey, I know where that camping trailer is, but I want to keep my name out of it. So I went down there and sure enough, there's a stolen camping trailer. They're not documented in the case anywhere. A confidential informant is somebody that's assigned a number. They go through quite a bit of interviewing through whoever the detective is that's going to use them to make sure that their statements and everything they give is true. So obviously you want to make sure then that the confidential informant isn't lying to you just to get out of trouble. You want to do your best, yes. So if I'm recapping the differences, a confidential informant has a lot more rules and regulations versus an informant who would just be saying, hey, I've seen this missing car, drive by there, you're going to see it. Yeah, and they might call you the next time they hear something that's going on. It's just a citizen that wants to keep their name out of it. Being we're a small community, is these the normal citizens that say, please don't subpoena me to court? Yes. Does the Adams County Sheriff's Office have a written policy on how to complete a search warrant and do a return on the search warrant? There could be something since I'm retired. I don't know because I don't normally do search warrants. I know they have policies and procedures, but specifically search warrants, that I don't know. Okay, so to save time, Shawn, would it be fair to say that if I asked about policies, you're not going to know a lot of them since they predate 2014 when you retired? I wouldn't. Well, they're changing the policy and procedures right now. They've went to a new system. I can't recall what the name of it is, so they're transitioning from our old policy procedures to new ones. I could tell you pretty much what's in all the old stuff, which is basically the same as they are today. I mean, there's not a lot of difference. So when we talk about the old stuff then, what does the old stuff have about search warrants and returns on those? As far as what the Sheriff's Department policy and procedures are? Yes. Well, you would have like evidence intake, what's to be done with the evidence, where it's to be stored, things of that nature. Okay, is there an Adams County Sheriff's Office policy in either the new or the old stuff and dealing with confidential informants? Now, the new one, I don't know. The old one, no, as far as I know, there was no set criteria for what you do with an informant. We did what we call sign them up, the sheriff approved it, and we went from there. When you sign these confidential informants up, was the prosecutor's office part of the process? No. When they were signed up, was there any agreements not to prosecute? No. All of them wasn't charged with criminal offenses. A lot of people come in and say, listen, this is happening in my neighborhood, I can do this to help you. So they sign them up and they give them a number rather than to use their name, and it goes from there. It just seems like there's some line blurring between this regular informant versus confidential informant who gets an assigned number. So question, has there ever been any confidential informants who are becoming informants to stay out of being charged with the crime? Not to stay out of it. Sometimes the prosecutor's office will agree to work with them on charges if it's something that's not too serious. And so, but the decision is made by the prosecutor? That decision would be made with the prosecutor, absolutely. Okay, and work with me. Just take me through a general process for how that happens because I've never seen it. So, and he used to be a prosecutor. So what's the process for that? Well, let's say you're charged with breaking and entering and theft. Okay. Yeah, you can give up a big drug dealer, for example. We go to the prosecuting, first we go to the sheriff and inform him of what we have. This would be handled by detectives. I'm just telling you, back when I was a detective, how it was done before I retired. So when you retired in 2014, you retired as a detective? I did, yes. Okay. We would contact the prosecuting attorney, knowing the prosecuting attorney would come down and have a meeting with them. And then they may make an agreement. Hey, we'll drop it down to a petty theft and burglary. I mean, it's not that they get off. It's just that if they can get someone bigger, then a lot of the times they'll work with them. But the prosecutor must be involved in that? In using a confidential informant or as far as charges? A confidential informant who may be facing charges. Yeah, you'd have to, if there's any kind of deal that's worked out, yeah, that would have to go through the prosecutor. There again, that's few and far between. A lot of people just do it to be doing it. They just, and there's like this whole elephant in the room. If you never arrest somebody and bring information to a prosecutor, there's the whole option to not set the ball in motion where a prosecutor would even begin to think about charging somebody. But that seems to be completely, and maybe intentionally so, off of Shawn Cooley's radar while he's answering these questions. So question from Osborne. Has the prosecutor's office ever declined to prosecute any types of cases generally? Well, I'm sure they have. That would be something you'd have to discuss with the prosecutor. I have no idea what they do. Well, who would have been the prosecutor in 2020? Oh, goodness. Sorry, 2022, sorry. I think it was David Kelly. Well, that's where I'm asking, too. Was it David Kelly or Aaron Haslam? They were right in that time frame. Well, David was the prosecutor and Aaron was an assistant prosecutor for a while. Aaron just came back as the prosecutor in the later part of 2024. So in 2024, when David decided to retire, he let Aaron step in as prosecutor. Okay. So it would have been Dave Kelly at the time. So when a detective would call and talk to the prosecutor's office, when we say the prosecutor's office, are we referring to, in this case, David Kelly, the elected prosecutor, or just like previously it would have been Chris Blanton, the chief? It could be him or his designee, it just depends. So the detective would have called and either talked to David Kelly, the elected, or Chris Blanton, the chief assistant. Or whoever he's assigned, David may say, well, I've got this attorney they'll take care of it. And I'm sure they'd brief with him before they'd make a decision, but how long does it usually take to do the whole process and getting the prosecutor's office involved, getting the sheriff involved? I mean, that seems like a bit of a headache, really. An hour or so. Is any of the deal or any of the agreement put in writing? That would be something you'd have to talk to the prosecutors about. We have nothing to do as far as the charges is concerned, except bringing them information upon which they could charge in the first place. Anyway, well, I guess so what I'm trying to say is, how would you stop then the event? So let's say that the CI is giving confidential information in return for not being criminally charged, but somebody actually accidentally sends up the packet. How would everybody know not to criminally charge them? Are you talking about sending up the charges on them? Yes. Well, there would have already been an agreement between the confidential informant and the prosecutor. When they got the case, they would do whatever they planned on doing. But is that agreement in writing? Not to me, it's not. Now, whether or not they do it to the informant, I've never seen it done, but that doesn't mean they don't. I'm sure there's been occasions where people say, okay, I'll do this, but I want something in writing. So if we hire a new officer today, let's just call him John Doe, and he started working. He obviously wouldn't know what happened yesterday or the day before. Right. How would he know that this confidential informant is not to be criminally charged? Well, he wouldn't be involved in the case. It would be whoever was using that person or whoever turned that person over to the detective to work. A new officer wouldn't be involved in it. So it would be up to the detective to know all this. Yeah. What would happen is, let's say I arrest the guy for driving under suspension. He says, hey, I know where there's all of this stolen equipment or whatever. Then I would go talk to the detective and I would say, hey, listen, he's got this information. And then he would be turned over to the detective, and that would be the end of my contact with him. So Osborne says, now I'm going to recap this because I think you've already said it. You haven't done any search warrants since you retired in 2014? And Shawn says, I haven't done any search warrants that would require a confidential informant. Like the trailer today. I'll do a search warrant on it tomorrow. It's secured. We believe it's full of stolen stuff. The trailer is stolen. But, I mean, it is what it is. It's a stolen trailer. So that's what the search warrant probable cause affidavit will be for. And now they pull out Exhibit 8, the search warrant and affidavit. Okay, now in reference to the Plaintiffs' Exhibit 8, you were not involved with the preparation of the search warrant? No. When was the first time you saw that search warrant? It would have been when Detective Newland handed it to me and asked me to read it over and see if it looked okay. So you're kind of involved in the preparation, at least in the editing, proofreading phase, but okay. So Osborne says, okay, did he give you any facts or did he just say, look, to make sure I didn't screw anything up? No, he just handed it to me and more or less proofread it and, I had done several search warrants before I retired. I believe he maybe even sent it to another deputy or two. I'm not sure, but I believe so. Did you make any changes to the search warrant? No. So, were you on duty on August 21st of 2022? I was, yes. What were your job duties that day? Road patrol, handling calls. So when you say road patrol, speeding tickets, responding for calls for service, services could be anything. Yeah, just normal law enforcement duties, yes. Okay. Do you remember about what time he had you look at the search warrant? No, I don't. I know it was after I was scheduled to be off because I stayed over. All this overtime. They didn't have enough manpower to execute the search warrant. but the time, I have no idea. What time were you scheduled to be off that day? There again, I don't recall. Like I said, I just covered when they were shorthanded and things. One day I may work 8 to 4, the next day I may work 7 to 3. It just varied from day to day, really. So we can safely say, since Judge Gabbard Jr. signed this as it looks to indicate 6:55 p.m., you were to be off work before 6:55. I believe I got off at 6 that night, but I'm not sure. Okay. I was asked to stay over, which kept me on duty. So they asked him to stay over before the warrant was signed. He says, I was asked to stay over. Like, let's fine comb this. So, signed at 6:55 p.m. He thinks he was supposed to be off by 6. And then was asked to stay over, which kept me on duty, kept me on payroll, so I stayed over to help. Okay, so after you proofread the search warrant, what happened next? They were calling in deputies. We were shorthanded at that time, which we normally are, and they were trying to get a hold of enough deputies to safely execute the search warrant. So they all knew. I think it's unbelievable, this notion that nobody knew that there was this plan and they were just waiting for the okay to go raid Afroman's home. So Osborne says how many deputies are normally needed for search warrants. It just varies based on what you're searching, how big the area is you're going to be searching, what the dangers are at that location. Okay, and so having read this search warrant before, knowing what they're looking for, how many deputies are needed to safely execute that search warrant? Well, you would normally have 3 to 4 deputies. That would be the entry team. And then you'd have perimeter deputies, which would be, providing you have the manpower, which we don't normally have, that you would have one stationed on each corner of the house, as well as in the egresses, like a side door or a front door or something that the entry team is not going to be going through. Do you remember how many deputies were taking place in the search? No, I have no idea. If I said it was more than 6, would that sound correct? Well, there's 7 in this lawsuit, so he says I would assume yes. So Osborne says, so there's other deputies that took part in the search, the execution of the search warrant, that are not parties to this lawsuit. As far as I know, there's only one, but there again, I don't know. I don't know who all was there. Would that be David Russell you're referring to? I don't know if David Russell was even there or not. You have to understand, when they do their briefing and everybody gets together, then we get in separate vehicles and we leave, and each one of them is assigned a certain area. And to tell you who was there, the only one I'm aware of that was there that wasn't part of the lawsuit was the sheriff, or the sheriff now. Mr. Dick? Yes. This guy's too busy looking at the pound cake to notice who's all there. So Mr. Klingler says, Mr. Who? Is he caught off guard by the Mr. Dick? Mr. Klingler says, Mr. Who? I'm sorry. Osborne says, Kenneth Dick. He got elected sheriff. He would have been a special deputy at that time. And then Shawn Cooley says, yes. So David Osborne continues. So you talk about planning. Do you recall the planning for the search warrant? If I remember right, we met at the squad building up in south of Winchester. Okay. They just got together. When I'm talking about the planning is who's going to do what. Who's going to be in what specific area when the search warrant was executed. Did they talk about what was to be seized or searched for? Well, you have the certain officers that's going to search. I wasn't part of that. I wasn't even really supposed to go into the residence. He made it to the kitchen. He says, okay, so during the planning stage, what was your duties going to be? Outside security, the perimeter. Okay, I'm going to go back to... I'm going to go back to it. So you said you normally do one person at each corner of the house, and then people at the doors for ingress and egress. So when you say perimeter, are you referring to any of those, or... Well, that is if you have enough personnel to do that. We wouldn't have had enough personnel that night to put somebody on all 4 corners of the house, and everybody at each door, and that kind of thing. No. Okay, so what was the configuration that night? As far as the other deputies was concerned, I couldn't tell you. Mine was, I was securing the driveway going up to the house to make sure that no one come in or no one ran out of the house down the driveway. What, because you were going to chase them? Like, what if someone did run by this particular deputy? This was his job, was to make sure if somebody went running down the driveway, he was the one in charge to stop it. He says, so you were just going to stay in the driveway next to the gate? Well, up besides the house, close to the house. Who opened the gate? I have no idea. Well, I probably should ask a different question for that. That assumes the gate was closed when everyone arrived. Was the gate closed when everyone arrived? I don't know. I was in the very tail end of the caravan of cruisers. Okay, so you made a statement I want to explore on. You said that you were to look at the perimeter. You thought you were looking at the edge of the house to make sure no one came out of the house to leave down the driveway. And then you said, but I did do some of the search in the house. What led you... Mr. Klingler. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, DJ. It's David J. Osborne. I didn't hear him say that, but before you go on, I wanted to clarify. I didn't hear him say he took part in the search, or maybe he did. Mr. Osborne. Okay, that's a good point, Bob. Shawn, did you take part in the search of the house? I did, yes. Okay, so how did you come from watching the driveway to taking part of the search? Well, when I pulled up, I don't think Justin was supposed to be, or maybe he was. I don't know what his assignment was. He was supposed to kick down the front door and couldn't. I don't know what his assignment was, but he did not have a body camera because he had been on time off. So I gave him my body camera because I was staying outside. When they made entry, they hollered and said, hey, we need more people in here. I was just the closest one to the door, so I just went in to help them secure. So he doesn't have his body camera, so we really only have that vantage point from the security footage of him looking at the pound cake. Because remember, we thought we might be watching Shawn Cooley's body cam for the footage. We've gotten through like 6 of the 8 and change hours of the body cam compilation. And we're like, okay, this person's close to the lemon pound cake in the kitchen. Maybe this is Shawn's. But then it ended up being Lisa's camera. I was just thinking we hadn't gotten to Shawn's. But maybe Shawn doesn't actually have body camera footage because he gives it up and then he goes inside and stands there in front of the cake. There's a bigger problem with that, though, because Brian Newland, when he brings down this initial money after his first count, he brings it down and puts it on the counter in the kitchen. And then it seems like it's Shawn Cooley and Angela that are sitting in that room, and Brian Newland goes and does something else. So, is this money left in the room with the guy that isn't even wearing a body camera? Because he gave it to Justin? Because they're short on body cameras? Like, I don't know. There's a lot there. I have a lot of questions. Oh, and hey to everybody tuning in. Yes, Sheriff Dick. I think Klingler, maybe he didn't know all the players in this case yet, but I think he was just taken aback by that. Hey, Destin V. Yeah, a caravan of cruisers sounds really creepy. Just a bunch of minivans pulling up. Judy says, I'm embarrassed to say, don't be embarrassed by this. I love this. I'm embarrassed to say my family ate up all the lemon pound cake slices bought on Friday the very next day. Well, it's easy when it's already sliced, right? It's convenient, so it's justifiable. And hey, don't F with Justice, good to see you. So we've got, let's see what this guy does. He gives his camera to Justin, they hollered, he goes inside. He says, I was just the closest one to the door. So I just went in to help them secure. He did great job securing this pound cake. How many people were on the breaching team? I have no idea. Well, you said there's normally 3 to 4. Would they have used 3 to 4 in this case? If they had that many to spare, yes. So how long could you see them as they breached the door? No, because there was like a storage building attached to the house. And by the time I got up the driveway, they were already inside that. It would be like a foyer type thing. They were already in there. So I think he's talking about the guard shack Amish extension add-on thing. So how many? I have no idea. I heard them hollering, sheriff's department, search warrant, demand entry several times, and then I heard them make entry into the residence. Within a minute or two, they said, we need more people in here to help secure this place. Okay. I was the closest one, so I went up to help. Okay. So as you went in to help aid with the search, what did you do? I just went in, and as they would secure a room, I would stay there. They would go secure another room. I would, make my way through the house, making sure nobody came up behind them and tried to hurt somebody. So you were kind of being the rear guard? Yes. Do you recall who was at the front of you clearing the house and the rooms? No, I don't. Okay. Do you remember how they were armed? No, I don't. Do you remember how you were armed? Yeah, I was armed with a Glock 40 caliber handgun. If I said that was your standard service weapon, would that be a correct statement? Yes. So you didn't take any extra firepower, such as a rifle or anything, because you were going to be outside? Well, there was a rifle in my cruiser. I didn't take it into the house. I wouldn't normally carry a rifle inside of a house because I wouldn't want, if you had to fire, Lord knows where that round is going to end up. And you say that because the bullet would go through walls? A rifle would, yeah, absolutely. Is it a correct statement to say you would not have had any interaction with the confidential informant mentioned in the search warrant? No, I did not have contact. Oh, no, I did have contact with her. Tell me about that contact. Detective Newland went in and interviewed her in the interview room at the sheriff's department. When he came back out, there was some kind of problem with the audio or the video. Something didn't take. So he asked if I would go in and ask her these specific questions that he was wanting answered. Myself and Sergeant Michael Estep, went in and took a short statement from her to make sure that it was audio and video recorded. Huh. Okay. Okay, so where would the statement be found today? It would be in the case file. Now, this may sound stupid for those of us not in law enforcement, but when you say case file, what are you referring to? There would have been a criminal case put together, and in that criminal case would have been any audio, video, or written statements, or anything that pertained to the case. Okay, when you say case, are you referring to her case, Mr. Foreman's case? Who are you referring to? It would have been Mr. Foreman's case. So nothing she said would be put in her own criminal case file. I don't know that she had a criminal case. And there you go, us ignoring the elephant in the room in the earlier portion of this deposition. Well, who tells the prosecutor that there might be a reason they might want to pursue charges on somebody? They just randomly find out on their own. They just get a premonition. And here we find out they already had a case file for Afroman to put this stuff into while they're speaking to this confidential informant, but they don't have a case file for her. Even though when they do this walk and talk, they say she had what would amount to a third-degree felony amount of marijuana in her home. So nothing she said would be put in her own criminal case file. I don't know that she had a criminal case. Okay, to your knowledge, did she willingly walk in to talk to Mr. Newland, like just come off the street? No. How did she come in to be in the sheriff's department then? Detective Newland got some kind of information. You'd have to ask him. But anyway, we went to her residence. Her residence, and quite a bit of marijuana was found at her house. Well, that sort of begs the question. If a lot of marijuana was found at her house, why wouldn't there be a criminal case on her? Well, at that time there wouldn't have been. That was the same night, so there may have been one completed right after that night. Well, I'm sure there was, yes. And would a copy of her statement have been put in that case file? Yes. So there would be copies of her statement, not only in the case file for Mr. Foreman, but also her own personal case file. And I'm thinking here, David Osborne has probably already looked for this and came up with nothing. So Shawn Cooley says, I don't know at that time how she was being used, whether it was a confidential informant. If it was a confidential informant, then no, it wouldn't have been in Mr. Foreman's original complaint. Now, as far as her case is concerned, yes, it would have been in her case file. Shawn, I'm going to ask you to review page 2 of Exhibit 8. I need you to clarify. Actually, if you want, I can actually read you some of it. Yes, if you would, please. I'm sorry, I left my glasses in the car. Down at the bottom under 1, it says, the relevant part, to conduct a knock and talk with resident, confidential informant number 1. So she was already a confidential informant number 1. You said you read this for proofreading, and now you're saying you don't know her status. Can you clarify that statement? Because if you read the search warrant, you knew her status. It's confidential informant number 1. Yeah, but I'm saying if they're a confidential informant, there would normally be an audio or video statement of that person put in the file with the person they're talking about. And if you said that you went in and were asked by Newland to go take a statement with Estep after his equipment wasn't working, there's 2 reasons that there should be one here. So the lady was a confidential informant. You and Mike Estep went in and asked her questions that Brian Newland told you to ask? Yes. And you recorded those statements? Yes, we did. And those statements then were put in a case file? I don't know what happened to them. They were turned over to Detective Newland. Would those be kept in the normal course of business? Yes. Is there a policy with the Adams County Sheriff's Office on what to do with their statements, how long to keep them and such? Well, they're kept until the case is resolved, either through appeals or convictions or, dismissal of a case. What if there was no charges filed? Well, that would be up to the prosecuting attorney's office. Well, I meant how long would you keep the documents and everything in that case? You'd have to ask the evidence technician on it. Those were all turned over to the evidence tech, as well as the prosecutor. Okay, so when you say evidence tech, are you referring to D? Uh-huh. I'm sorry, D. Williams? D. Rosillo. D. Rosillo, yes. So she would be the one to ask if it still exists and what's going with that statement. Yes. Okay, so after you and Mike Estep went in and interviewed the confidential informant, what happened next? We went in, shut the recording down, and told Brian, hey, here's what she said, and here's the CD of her statement. I'm confused again, Shawn. I'm just going to ask. So you said Brian Newland came out because there was an issue with the recording. Can you clarify that? Why did Brian Newland not take these statements? Well, he did originally. He went in and interviewed her. Then he was busy. He was typing up the search warrant, this and that and the other. Well, that's a common practice for us to go through and make sure we got everything as far as the audio or video recording. And this is all after the beginning of this deposition. He's saying that he didn't really help with the preparation of the search warrant. And here he is, intimately involved in every step while Brian Newland's typing it up. So apparently there's something that happened to that recording. Either audio or video didn't record. He was doing the affidavit and the search warrant, as far as I remember, and he said, hey, can you guys go in and ask her these questions again so we can make sure we got it on the recording? Okay. And so what recording system took these statements? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Our interview room is audio and video recorded. So these were taken on the interview room, audio and video? Yes. Okay. And that begs the question. So what wasn't working when Brian Newland were not recorded? I don't know what was wrong with it. I know we had a problem for a long time with the microphone. If you touched it, it disconnected. But everything would seem like it's recording, and this because the actual recording device is in the hallway next to the 911 center. Okay. So you wouldn't know that it wasn't recording until you went to play it back. Okay. So Brian Newland comes back and tells you it didn't record. What did you do to make sure it was recording that he didn't do? Well, we checked it, and if I remember right, and I could be wrong, if I remember right, that's what it was. The microphone had somebody moved it or touched it, and it disconnected. So it'd be a question of audio not being provided, there would be video, though. If that's what happened, I don't recall. I wasn't in there when whatever went wrong. He asked me to do something, so I did it. I never got into it with him as to why. These are very, very sharp questions by David Osborne. So is there any report made that details what happened, gives a transcript of the audio? You mean like a written transcript? Strike that, let me rephrase. So usually when I read a police report, it will say, suspect said car was blue, kind of like a snippet of what was said. Right. Is there a written report that has snippets of what the confidential informant said? That would have been in your affidavit for search warrant. Okay, there would be no other writing, though, containing those? Well, yeah, you would put it in your statement and in your narrative of the report. So there should be a narrative for the search? Well, you asked about the search or the interview with the informant? Okay, that's a good point. Strike that. So, would there be a police report made on the interview of the confidential informant? Number 1. Well, there wouldn't be a separate police report made on that. That would be documented in the affidavit on the search warrant, as well as on the officer's notes and the narrative on the report itself. Okay. We don't do a separate report for an interview, no. Okay. Do you do a report as part of the search of a person's residence? There again, that is put into the officer's notes. And when we say officer's notes, which officer would we be referring to? Well, normally, every officer that was actually involved in it would document some kind of, assisted with this search warrant at that time, this date, something of that nature. The detailed one would be by the detective or the officer's written search warrant. So if the search warrant contains statements of the confidential informant and the microphone was not working when Mr. Newland was in there, and he asked you and Mike to go in and ask questions, how can he type up an affidavit that contains statements of hers if he can't listen to the audio? Well, he'd interviewed her prior to. So he may actually just be putting what he thinks he heard, not exactly what we could verify on audio. Well, no, he would have reviewed the audio and videotape after we were done to make sure it worked and make sure everything was recorded. So if that's the case, why didn't he take the statements? Well, there again, when he came out and was viewing and listening to the audio and video recording, he determined that something had malfunctioned. He was listening to it while he was doing the search warrant and paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork in a search warrant. So, well, apparently not this one. So he said, hey, this didn't record. Can you guys just go in and ask her about this, and this? And that's what we went and we asked her, and we come back out and make sure everything was on the CD, and we turned it over to him. Now, this just seems like a loop-de-loop way that if Brian's the one making the representations on the affidavit, he can now rely on this secondary interview and rely on what they go, and in their questions, they might be feeding to this confidential informant who's sitting in the sheriff's office, maybe waiting to get permission to leave, because that's a gray area. And so they go in and they say, tell us about these specific things, cueing her in on exactly what to say. And then Brian Newland can secondhand rely on them asking these questions and not necessarily be misleading the court aside from having personal knowledge about how this information was obtained from this confidential informant. And this seems like to me, by the way this guy is, well, this is how we typically do it, and then stumbling every time he's asked about the specifics in this process, kind of seems like this is what they normally do. So he goes and gets his CD, made sure everything's on the CD, and they turned it over to Newland. What kind of things did you ask her about? I don't remember, to be honest with you. They were questions that pertain to Mr. Foreman. The specific questions, I don't know. So did you go in and ask leading questions? There you go. Did you go in and ask leading questions until she told you that the person she was referring to was Mr. Foreman? Or did Mr. Newland tell you to ask specific questions about Mr. Foreman? No, he just asked me, hey, ask her this, ask her that, ask her the other. Like I said, she was a cooperating informant. So I asked her whatever it was, the questions that he wanted answered, and that was the extent of it. And these questions would be contained on an audio recording in the case file? Yes. And you were present for I think it's called a knock and talk? Yes. This may sound stupid, but what is a knock and talk? A knock and talk would be, for example, you got information there's a meth lab in a residence, and it was very common for us back during the height of the meth labs. If we didn't have enough probable cause to do a search warrant or anything like that, so we'd go up and knock on the door, talk to the people, and say, listen, we've got a complaint, of an odor coming from this house, or whatever the complaint that we received, and say, we have reason to believe maybe you're cooking meth in here. Do you know what's going on? Okay. And a lot of people tell you, yeah, I'm doing this or doing that. Others tell you to get off their property. It's just a mixed bag? Yes. So do you recall what led you guys to do a knock and talk on the confidential informant's residence? No, I do not. Okay. Now, wait a minute. I do believe there was some kind of an altercation prior to that, is my understanding. Altercation involving the confidential informant? Somebody set their car on fire and tried to set a bomb off or something of that nature. Well, damn. You don't remember that? And so you guys went to talk with a confidential informant. Well, at that time, she wasn't a confidential informant. But she's in the affidavit as one. So remember, they go and prepare the search warrant affidavit the same day that they execute the search warrant. This all happens really quickly. Anyway, so they say, well, at the time, she wasn't a confidential informant. So you went to talk with her. You knock on the door. What happens next? Well, I didn't knock on the door, Detective Newland did, and he talked to her, I talked to her, asked her a couple of things like, what happened, or just questions in general. And you're referring to the incident that led you guys out there? Yes. And these incidents are not related to Mr. Foreman or anything that came subsequent? Well, they were supposedly connected, is my understanding. Okay, so when she was talking with you and Mr. Newland, were you guys standing on her porch talking? Where did you guys have this conversation? I believe she was standing in her doorway. It wouldn't have been on a porch. It was just a little concrete pad out in the front of government housing. And there again, at that point, I wasn't participating much in it. I was just there with Detective Newland in case something happened. Sort of backup? Yeah. So how do we go from talking... Yeah, you don't really know, you don't know what was happening, but you just described that you're squeezed on this little tiny government housing, doorway area. All signs showing that this is small, tiny. But you have no idea what's going on. When you must be crammed right there. So David asks, so how do we go from talking to her on the small concrete thing to finding 2,131 grams, more or less, of felony third-degree marijuana in her possession? Well, she gave permission to search the residence. Why was that even asked? That I don't know. That wasn't... You would have to ask the detective that. I don't know. She gave permission to search the house. And when I went into the bedroom, there was a black plastic container, and when I opened it up, it had several containers of marijuana in it. And so after finding that, she was taken into custody? I don't know. I'm sure she was transported to the sheriff's department. I don't know if she was placed under arrest or... Can I ask you a question, Shawn? Yeah. If you pulled me over and I had 2,131 grams of marijuana in my car, would you arrest me? No. Why not? Because we have to have it tested prior to... The prosecutor's office does not want us arresting anyone until we get the lab results back that it is what we think it is. So it would be tested by BCI. BCI, yes. So when it says here, if you flip to page 2, green leafy vegetation, which indicated presence of tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, which is what I'll refer to it from now on, there's no way of knowing if this was marijuana until after it was tested with BCI. Well, we could field test it. How do you field test it? We use field test kits. Tell me about those test kits. Well, they're usually... It just depends on what kind of narcotic it is. Normally, it's a small plastic container with 3 ampules in it. Each ampule has a measured amount of chemical in it. If you think it's, say you're testing for heroin, you'd break ampule number 1, shake it, break ampule number 2, and then you break the 3rd ampule. If it's a test for heroin, then it may say, okay, this. If it turns purple, it's positive for heroin. But the prosecutor's office also wants a chemist to test the drugs before they... Okay, is that commonly referred to as a NIC test kit? Yes. Do you know what the error rate of or maybe it's NIC, test kit is for field testing of marijuana or hemp? I have no idea. So you don't know if an NIC test can differentiate between those two? Between what two? Hemp and marijuana? No, I have no idea. But there again, so why would you put THC in the affidavit? And why didn't you correct it? So if he has no idea, and they don't know if they field tested it or not, but there again, so Shawn says you wouldn't arrest at the beginning anyway, regardless of what the NIC test revealed. So when it talks here about indicate the presence of THC, it's referring to a field that the prosecutor would not even prosecute a person with. I don't know if that's referring to a field test kit. I have no idea. Okay, well, I didn't write the search warrant, so I don't know. Well, if you look at the last sentence, it says, a field test was conducted on the green leafy substance which did indicate the presence of THC. Okay, so that would mean that the green leafy substance was tested with a NIC test kit. If a NIC test is what he used, I don't know. Well, what other test could he use? Well, there's different kinds of chemical tests you can use on them. I always use the NIC test kit because they're easy to store, they're easy to keep in the cruiser. Did you test the green leafy substance found at Tasha's house? No. Did you observe it being tested? Not that I recall. Okay. Back in 2022, can you recall, other than the NIC test kits, how else you could test for the presence of THC in a green vegetative substance? Yeah, we would send it to the lab at the Attorney General's office. Well, let's face it. You can't have a knock on a door and talk to a confidential informant and get a test back from BCI the same day. That's why we don't arrest on the same day. Okay, so to your knowledge, was this 2,131 grams ever sent to the lab for testing? I'm sure, I don't know, I would assume it was. All of our drugs are sent to the lab. Okay, do you know if criminal charges were ever brought against the confidential informant in relation to the possession of this? No idea. Would it surprise you to say that a search of the public records does not show an indictment for a felony 3 against the confidential informant? I have no idea. Okay, have you ever dealt with the Tasha Chamblin on anything other than the search warrant and this knock and talk? Not that I recall, no. Okay, so you go in the bedroom, you find this vegetative substance. What happens next? I informed the detective, and I believe there was somebody else there with us. I know, the deputy. Okay. Or an officer, if I remember right. Okay, so you tell Mr. Newland, hey, look, there's this green vegetative substance. Yes. What happens next? It was turned over to him. Okay, what did you do next in the process? I continued searching the house for other items. Okay, did you find anything else? I don't recall. Did you find any guns? Not that... I didn't. No hand grenades? No. So the only thing you recall finding was this large quantity of vegetative substance. That I found, yes. Okay, so after you completed your search of the house, what else did you do? I went back to the sheriff's office, or went out and handled calls. And remember, this is all the same day. This was all be the same day. And he says he thinks he left at 6 that day. The search warrant ends up getting signed off by the judge, Judge Gabbard Jr., at 6:55 p.m. that evening. And somehow he was just hanging around waiting for the execution of the search warrant because he would have been off by 6 that day. So Osborne says, okay. And so Tasha would have went with Mr. Newland to the police department while you went on other calls? I don't know where she went. I could have transported her, I don't remember. I don't think I did. It's been a long time ago, but no. I would have went back and resumed my regular duties as a deputy sheriff. Okay, so when you went in and talked with Miss, or I don't know when she may have become a confidential informant, so I may interchangeably refer to Tasha as also confidential informant number 1. So if I do, it's the same person I'm talking about. But when you start talking with her in the interview room after Mr. Newland asked you to, did you ask her questions about Mr. Foreman's residence? Yes. And what did she tell you about the residence? So remember, this is after the audio video wasn't recording and Brian Newland's already typing up the search warrant. He says, hey, go ask her these questions. So she told us there was normally a large quantity of marijuana, or that there was a large quantity of marijuana being stored in a false wall in the garage. There had been a young lady there from down south somewhere that was kept in what they called the dungeon, which was, she said, was just two bedrooms that were side by side in a hallway off the kitchen. Told us that her and her boyfriend or husband had built this false wall. That the marijuana, Mr. Foreman had stored it in a storage building that was rented under, I believe, her boyfriend or her name. And that since everything transpired over the alleged bombing and the arson fire of her car, that she took it out as retribution for what she thought he did. Okay, so wait. So this confidential informant also says he keeps weed in this false wall and tells these guys, I thought he bombed my car and set my car on fire, so I went and took that marijuana that I'm saying he stores behind that false wall, and I took it back as some get back because I think he did this to me. So wouldn't this be her saying she broke into the house and took this supposed weed that was stored in the false wall? What? Like, hold on. Like, let me just, like, let that marinate for a second. Because this is a detail that's not in the affidavit. And it's just wholly unbelievable. Not only is this woman sitting with what would be a 3rd-degree felony amount of marijuana, but she's saying she stole it as her version of some type of get back. Like, the lie is even worse than it sounds just in the affidavit. And if he remembers this, and this wasn't in the affidavit, it seems like a conscious reason to not include this and to omit this in your representation to the judge that needs to sign off on this search warrant. So we're going to put the potato label up. Like, this is crazy. How does this get worse? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think it was her weed. Or she may have stolen it, but I don't necessarily think she stole it from Afroman. Because first of all, he already had surveillance cameras at that point in time. But secondly, like, I just think it was her weed. like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Yeah, so she knew she had some dealings with Afroman, but not in recent times. And I'm sure they're going to ask some questions about this, but the quick context from the affidavit that was documented for the purpose of the affidavit, she said she hadn't been there in a month, even though she was well aware that Afroman was supposedly keeping women in his basement and making them piss in buckets and poop in buckets, that she only decided to stop going there when he published a video depicting himself peeing on her head. Which is kind of like, that's a really weird reason to stop going over to this horrible place. And then she says her estranged husband played some role in helping get this other woman, Jo, transported from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where Afroman lived for some time. I think he's doing a show there soon in Hattiesburg. I saw it on his Instagram today. But this woman, Jo, he dealt with, they had some type of like intimate relationship for a few months. This woman, Jo. Like, it just all seems like, you know, the Woody sir, you sprinkle in a little truth with the lie. I think this is a very big lie with a teeny tiny sprinkle. And the cops are like drooling at the mouth, like chomping at the bit to have an excuse. They're all sitting around waiting for the judge to sign off so they can go raid Afroman's house. And that's where we are. That's where we are. Jay Tinsel, I'm glad. I feel the same way. Although I also think, so part of this is, I'm nosy, I just wanted to see the whole depth of the case. But as we read these, I'm like, wow, this is quite the behind the scenes look that I think is important beyond just Afroman's case. So I'm glad you think so. Glad you think so. I'm enjoying it as well. Brooklyn says Amsterdam's thinking about making it illegal and closing the red light district. That's interesting. I gotta read more on that. I have not heard that, but I'm not doubting it. I'm just like in a bubble on trial watching. Hey, Christy. Yeah, and David said, so would she have planted something when she broke in for the cops to find? Like, just a mess. Just a mess. So they say, let's read her story again. This ends off by saying, well, she told us that there was normally a large quantity of marijuana, or that there was a large quantity of marijuana being stored in a false wall in the garage. That there had been a young lady there from down south, that would have been Jo, somewhere that was kept in what they called a dungeon, which was, she said, was just 2 bedrooms that were side by side in a hallway off the kitchen. Told us that her and her boyfriend or her husband had built this false wall. Now, Afroman in one of his depositions had mentioned, like, Jo had been in her own bedroom, like in the upstairs part, there was just another room, and she'd started staying in there because she was annoying him. I forget his exact words in the deposition, but something to that effect. So Shawn continues that the marijuana, Mr. Foreman had stored it in a storage building that was rented under, I believe, her boyfriend or her name. And that since everything transpired over the alleged bombing and the arson fire of her car, that she took it out as retribution for what she thought he did. Okay, so wait, this is in a storage unit then and not the false wall. Okay, so good thing we read that again. So did they check this storage unit then? And why would he keep weed in a storage unit with a known thief? It almost makes more sense if it was actually a break-in and he kept it at his house. Why would you keep your weed in a storage unit in somebody else's name? So David Osborne, okay, he's reading our mind, my mind at least. Okay, so I've got to unpack this a little bit, Shawn. It sounds like you just said the confidential informant told you that she stole 2,131 grams of marijuana from Mr. Foreman as payment for something No, she didn't say she stole it. She said he'd been using, she was a personal assistant for Mr. Foreman. Sorry, how else are you supposed to interpret this context? Yeah, she didn't say the word stole. But she's saying she took something that was his as get back. So Osborne just says, okay. She said that he had asked her or her boyfriend to rent a storage unit, and in that storage unit, she said was several £100, if I remember right, of marijuana. Something happened. I don't know what it is. They had some kind of disagreement. A guy was caught firebombing her car. Somehow it was supposedly traced back to Mr. Foreman, and she took these drugs, I guess, to, I don't know, out of spite, or, like I said, my questioning with her was very limited. Why wasn't any of this in the affidavit? This just shows they have no interest in searching where, if they think she's credible, they don't want to search, or I guess ask permission for whoever's name is on a storage unit. Why isn't this part of the affidavit? So then he's qualifying. He's like, I said, my questioning with her was very limited. I don't know anything. So Osborne says, okay, did she say when the last time she had contact with Mr. Foreman was? I didn't interview her. Not to me. She didn't know. Did she talk? Well, I mean, you said that your belief was that she was his personal secretary, or assistant, sorry. Is that what she told you her job with him was? She said that at the residence, and then she said it again, I believe, during the interview, or when she was at the sheriff's department and was talking to someone that said, hey, I've been his personal assistant for this for several years or whatever. Okay, so I would like to get clarification on two things. If you could flip to page 3 again. We're at the top of the page. I'm going to read this sentence in here. It says, confidential informant number 1 further stated that he or she was holding the marijuana for Afroman, Joseph Foreman. If she took it, how is she holding it for somebody? Oh my goodness. That could have been what she said. Like I said, I don't recall exactly what she said about it. I know that it supposedly was in a storage building that belonged to her. She took it out and took it to her residence. Whether she stole it or he told her to take it there, that wasn't part of my interview. Okay, well, let's go to number 2 here. The last sentence, it says, confidential informant 1 further stated Afroman has a basement, referred to as the, quote, dungeon, in which he, being Afroman, keeps women locked in. But you testified earlier that the dungeon is 2 bedrooms put together off of the kitchen. That's what she told me. I never heard anything about a basement. But you reviewed the search warrant affidavit to proofread it. You said, when I asked Justin that earlier, that was the first I heard of a basement. Okay, Shawn, this may sound like a very stupid question, but you reviewed the search warrant, correct? I just proofread it. Read over to make sure, the spelling and everything looked good. As far as going into detail on it, no. So they just had because he said several deputies also reviewed the search warrant. So you walk around with this search warrant, you have Shawn and maybe 2 other deputies just to make sure the spelling's good. And you still spelled Joseph's name wrong in the search warrant. Okay. So you didn't make sure that any of this matched your interview? What was on my interview did, but he had talked to her prior to, so... Yeah, but we're going back to your interview again. Confidential informant number 1 further stated Afroman has a basement referred to as the dungeon. You just testified that the dungeon is 2 bedrooms together off the kitchen. So if you were reading this doesn't match what you answered. Well, that may have been something that she told Brian. I'm saying that she never told me there was a basement. Shawn, if you're reading this, wouldn't you read this for accuracy too? Well, I don't know what she told Brian. But if it's what's written here doesn't add up with what she told you, that would be an issue, wouldn't it? Well, I didn't go into detail with her on, she just, hey, there's 2 rooms where he keeps them locked in there, that's down, we call it the dungeon. Now, she may have went into detail with Detective Newland and said, it's in a basement. I never heard that, so... Okay, and so, when you talked about this young lady, is that the juvenile that Justin was referring to? Yeah, my understanding was there was a juvenile that was supposedly being held in one of those rooms in the house. Okay, well, you said young lady earlier. So is the young lady and the juvenile the same person, or is there 2 different people that were being held? As far as I know, it was just one. But yet the search warrant affidavit says women. I wasn't aware at that time she was a juvenile. I heard that later on. Okay, do you remember when you heard that? No, I don't. So you finished talking to Tasha. You proofread the search warrant. What happened next? Well, he would have taken the search warrant to the prosecutor and to the judge and got the search warrant signed, and then we would have assembled the deputies to go execute the search warrant. Okay, and because Adams County was short-staffed, you guys were calling in deputies? I wasn't. I don't know who. I don't have the authority to call in other deputies. Who had that authority? Brian Newland would have had that authority. He was a sergeant, but I'm sure he would have cleared it with the sheriff first. This may sound stupid. Was he a sergeant or a detective, or are those not mutually exclusive? No, a detective, sergeant. Most detectives are already a sergeant or a lieutenant. Mr. Klingler says, DJ, sorry, 1 second. I think they need something from Shawn. And then they go off the record, then say, I'm sorry, did you ask me something? No, I was trying to figure out what he needed keys for. So we were talking about detectives. So detectives are a sergeant or higher? Well, they don't have to be. You could just be a regular detective. But most agencies, including ours, when you're a full-time detective, you're normally a sergeant. That way, when you go to a crime scene, you have authority over the deputies. You know, if you say, hey, don't walk across that bloody floor, you have the authority to make them not do that. So your detectives normally hold rank. I like your example there because I would be the first one to say, isn't that common sense? Yeah, well, you would think. Okay, so what all authorities does a detective have? Well, there's no authority in being a detective. A detective follows up on cases, let's say, for example, today, for example, with the trailer. A deputy took a report that a camping trailer had been stolen. Mr. Osborne says, can we pause for a second here? And they go off the record. Then they come back. But for example, the deputy took a report on a stolen camper. They normally run call to call, so they don't have the time to follow up on leads or this kind of stuff. I work investigations right now. That's what I do 2 days a week, following up on complaints that's filed with the deputies. Received information that this camping trailer was at a certain location. Went down there and got it. I don't hold any rank. I'm just a regular deputy assigned to do investigations. So if a sergeant showed up, he gets to tell you what to do? Absolutely. And so you said it would have been Brian calling out people. Is that a normal duty of a sergeant or a lieutenant to call out officers? I didn't say Brian did. I don't know who did. Brian may have designated someone to do it. Someone else to do it. The sheriff could have been it. I don't know. I know I didn't, so... So have you had any other contact with the confidential informant since the time you interviewed them for Mr. Newland? Not that I recall. I think I had her she was in a traffic stop and I showed up at a traffic stop. But as far as that's concerned, I don't recall. I don't even know her. I couldn't tell you her name. Okay, so was a basement ever found at the house? Not that I've seen. Just say no. Other than providing sort of a rear guard action for the officers as they went through clearing the house, did you do any searching of the residence? Yes, Mr. Poundcake. What else did you search? Where did you search? I helped them search the closet upstairs where Justin was referring to the suits. In other words, where the money was. So you would have been helping them search the suits? Yeah, probably. I don't know that I actually stuck my hand down in them, but we searched everywhere we can search. Okay, so what in your mind, based on everything, what were you searching for when you went into Mr. Foreman's residence? Well, you're searching for marijuana or any other kind of drugs. You're searching for any documentation where the drugs have been sold or purchased. You're looking for large amounts of money that may be associated with drug trafficking. Okay, and when you say documents, what kind of documents are you referring to? A lot of your drug dealers or some of your drug dealers will have, for example, a journal. Once in a while, they'll be dumb enough to leave it at... You taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? Once in a while, they'll be dumb enough to leave it at the residence and have it out where we can find it. So they normally carry this drug dealing journal with them. But once in a while, they're dumb enough to leave it at the residence and have it out where we can find it. And it will say, John Doe, 20 ounces of methamphetamine. He owes me $500. And they'll keep that until it's paid off. It's like a running tab of the people that they deal with. Okay, is that what everybody was looking for when they were opening the CDs? Just trying to see if there was like notes hidden or something? I don't know anything about CDs. Okay. I spent the majority of my time talking to Mr. Foreman's wife in the kitchen. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Okay, when did Miss Foreman arrive on the scene? I don't know how long it was. Was it shortly after the breaching? I really don't know. It wasn't very long. Did she let you guys know that she had a key to the residence? I never asked. Okay. She did tell me she didn't live there. Did she tell you where she lived? Next door. And did she tell you why she came over? I don't believe that even came up. We just sat down and had a general conversation. We never talked about the search warrant or anything of that nature. We more talked about his antique cars than anything. Okay, and this conversation was held inside the residence? In the kitchen, yes. A stupid question. If that could have been a potential crime scene, why would you have an independent person that has really nothing to do with the thing inside the residence? Well, that had already been cleared by the search team. So, if I recall, Sergeant, I'm trying to think of which one it was, one of them had her sit at the table. They said, you can come in, but you have to sit right there. You can't be up moving around. You can't go room to room. You can't do this, that, and the other. So they said, hey, you care to sit here and watch her? So we just sit there and talked. You just talked about cars, and I just talked about the weather, whatever. I mean, just the normal, nothing about the search. Okay, and so I take it you had the conversation. What happened next as you're talking to her? Well, the only thing that sticks out of my mind is the search was completed. Oh, that whole time, just like, this is what was on his mind the entire time. He doesn't remember anything about sitting here having this conversation. And from what I remember, Angela was like trying to FaceTime, was trying to communicate with Afroman. She was trying to relay messages between the officers and Afroman. At some point, she was walking around trying to help them get access to keys that they were looking for. And in his world, he's just like, I was just in the kitchen chilling. We talked about the weather. So, hey, Dolly. Good to see you, Dolly. Yeah, Dolly wants to know, drug dealers don't use QuickBooks? They don't use QuickBooks? They don't use code names? They just carry it all around. They just carry it all around. My goodness. Anyway, so I started the stream off by like, well, there's this one crazy part in this. Because what I do, guys, when I try to make a thumbnail, I just want to find like something like to show what the topic's going to be. So I went to the index and I looked for the word cake. And cake is indexed like 3 different times. So I went to one of the iterations of cake, and we're going to get to it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put this in the thumbnail. And I read that page and I was like, this is ridiculous. But I didn't know we'd have all of this along the way. This has been a journey. So they go on, they say that the only thing that sticks in Shawn Cooley, Lemon Pound Cake's mind is that the search was suddenly completed. He's in the kitchen and then the search is done. They went to try to secure the door back, and I went to the sheriff's office and then shortly went off duty. Okay, did you have any interaction with the security system? No. And I take it no young juvenile was found. I didn't find any. Did you ever enter these 2 bedrooms that were called the dungeon? I opened the doors to them, yes. Describe what you saw in the room. Very small bedrooms, had small beds in them. That was all. I mean, they kind of looked like a jail cell, to be honest with you. There wasn't much to them. Okay, is there a policy with the Adams County Sheriff's Office to decrease property damage during a search warrant execution? I don't know that there's a policy. There's a, let's don't tick the sheriff off by doing a lot of damage. So we normally try to find the easiest, less destructive way that's still safe for the officers. I take it at that time Mr. Rogers didn't like getting calls about damage. No, I mean the damage that was done was very, very minimal. When you say minimal, what do you mean? Just a door and a door frame. Okay, that you know of? That I seen. So that's the only damage you saw personally. Now this man walks in through both of these knockdown doors, and then he's standing in the kitchen where this door is busted out of the door frame, and the officers for the rest of the search are walking over it. Like, nobody moves the door out of the way. It stays on the floor, and it's in all of the footage anytime they show the camera. The vantage point from anyone walking through the kitchen. So, and it's just a door. It's just a door. He has no clue. He says, so that's the only damage you saw personally? Yes, yes. Okay, so there could have been more, you just didn't see it? I mean, I was through the whole house, but there could have been. If there was, I didn't notice it. So you didn't see them when they fiddled with the security system? No. Okay, and this may sound stupid. Are you suing Mr. Foreman in your personal capacity or as an officer? In my personal capacity. Okay, now you're seeking damages for emotional distress. What is emotional distress? Well, the emotional distress is both me and my family, including my children. Okay, and one of his children is Justin Cooley, the crackhead Dr. Phil. Okay, so tell me about the emotional distress. Well, we'll start out with my daughter. Okay. She was 18 years old. Can you give us her name, please? If I refer back to her, I don't. Christine. Okay. Christine had just become a 911 dispatcher at the sheriff's department, so the whole family works here. Oh, man, this is another new detail. I don't know if we heard that one of the 911 dispatchers who was getting barraged was also a Cooley. So she just become a 911 dispatcher at the sheriff's department just prior to this occurring. We would get sometimes maybe 100 or more calls a day. They would call her a bitch, a whore, a slut, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your dad, you're all a bunch of criminals. Oh man, pin this for the story I've been telling you guys I can't wait to get to. You have all of this happening. Even threats, I'm going to kill you. Specifically this one. Threatening to kill a police officer. Do we take action on this? And she would come home from work bawling. And this was almost a daily basis that she worked, threatening the family. My daughter at that time was an EMT. She was getting the same thing from the public. It got to the point, and my wife was a paralegal at the prosecutor's office. So they started calling the prosecutor's office, threatening everybody at the prosecutor's office. We lived in the country. We never locked our cars. We never locked our doors. We never had any problems. It got so bad that my daughters, specifically one of them, would wake me up, Dad, are you sure the back door is locked? Are you sure? And if the dog would bark, they would all come out of their beds in my room crying. Hey, see what's going on? Is there somebody out there, Dad? It's just absolutely terrified them over the nonsense that this gentleman done. Now you say they were calling the prosecutor's office? Yeah, they called the prosecutor's office, threatened my wife, threatened other staff members up there. Did the prosecutor's office ever charge anybody out of this? I don't think they were ever able to, really. I know as far as the sheriff's department was concerned, we have page after page after page of documented calls that came in, but most of these were from, there's apps you can use where I can go in and take your phone number and put in the phone and call somebody and it will show up that it's you. So they're spoofing. And again, we saw this in I think it might have been Michael Estep's, if not Justin Cooley's. But they're acting like if you go and spoof your number, you're in the clear. There's nothing that can ever be done. There's no way to deter it. There's no way to track you. Because they're leaning on it as a way to shield them so they can claim that they were receiving these threats but simultaneously didn't do anything about these supposedly credible death threats. So there's apps you can use where I can go in, take your phone number and put it in the phone and call somebody and it'll show up that it's you. I don't think, other than one person, that they were ever really able to trace it back to who. And that was somebody out of, if I remember, was in Sacramento, California. No, there was two because there was one in Canada. Maybe it was the guy that bought the door. Okay, but like I said, this caused a lot of stress. My boy was constantly on edge, so this must be Justin. I mean, we were threatened, and I can give you examples of that. Oh, here we go. I think we're going to get to the story. And I can give you some examples of that if you'd like. We're going to get time on that, yes. Okay, so later. So I've got to clarify because you mentioned a couple things. You said your boy. Are you referring to Justin Cooley? That is crackhead Dr. Phil. Let's get his picture back up. You say your boy, are you referring to Justin Cooley? Yes, Justin. So when you're talking your boy, you're talking about Justin Cooley, who testified previously. Yes, that's part 2 of the depositions if you want to go check that one out. Okay, and you said your child and EMT. You're not talking about Christine there, are you? No, Christine is a 911 dispatcher. Maybe he said Christian, I don't know. Who are you? Caitlin is an EMT. She quit that job as well. Okay, and your wife's name that was at the prosecutor? Her legal name is Sherry. Sherry, okay. So you say people were giving threats to you. Were those coming from Mr. Foreman or just these people calling in on this app? Well, some of the people that had read this nonsense or watched his nonsense, or watched it on the internet, and like I said, my family was terrified for months. My daughters wouldn't go out by themselves, wouldn't go to the grocery store. They were just constantly, hey, we're going to kill you, we're going to kill your family, and it got to the point where I had to go to the doctor. Which doctor did you go to? I went to Dr. Greenlee. Okay, tell me about your visit with the doctor. I went to Greenlee and told him what I was going on, and I said, listen, it's getting to the point where it's nerve-wracking. My kids are scared to death. This and that and the other. So he put me on a low dosage of Ativan. Okay. Had you ever been threatened in the line of duty before? Sure. I imagine in 41 years, you've been at least once or a time or two, yeah. Probably even had some people pull a gun on you. Not that lived. Okay. So when I asked about the stress, and this goes back to, this gives, I think it's reasonable anyway, but this adds to the reasonableness of Afroman being concerned that if he had been home during the raid and they saw him holding a remote while they're walking around with guns, it just adds another layer of reasonableness to the commentary Afroman was doing. So we got, okay. So when I ask about the stress that these threats would be causing you, is it really the stress of you being threatened personally or just the way your family reacted to it? It was both. Okay. What made this threat any different than the ones that you've had before? Well, normally if you go on a call, you have a drunk or someone doped up. Well, I'm going to whip your blankety blank blank. You lock them, you up. It's over with. This was continuous. Day after day. So you lock people up for their threats. This was continuous day after day after day after day. My daughter's coming home day after day after day after day crying. My wife coming home from work tore up. Scared to death they're going to burn our house down. They're going to do this. Somebody is going to hurt the kids. So this was not just an isolated incident. This was a continuation that went on for way over a year. So then when the question becomes is, did you have any conversations with the prosecutor's office about charging somebody? That wasn't up to me. That was up to the sheriff. I know they tried to track the calls. And like I said, as far as I know, they weren't successful. Did you make complaints to the sheriff about this? Well, yeah, we talked about it every day. That's why he made them start keeping a log of all the calls that came in. Is that log still in existence? Yeah, I'm sure it is. We had none of that come in at trial. We have the plaintiffs bring in the 13-minute and change video of Lickum Lisa, but we don't have any of these business records come in. If you were the plaintiff's attorney and the plaintiffs, is there a reason you wouldn't bring this log in if it existed? Because to me, my conclusion is the log probably doesn't exist. Because maybe the calls don't exist, at least to the extent that they're characterizing them here. So, like, crazy. So they say, I don't know. Or when was the last time you saw it? I don't know. It died down for a little while, and then he went back on his internet nonsense, and it started up a few months ago. And remember, this is August 2025 that this deposition's taking place. They started keeping a log again. So probably 2 or 3 months ago. Okay, so in relation to the doctor, how much money have you spent on Greenlee and this low dose of Ativan? Well, I've got insurance, so it would have been a copay. I've probably seen him, I don't know. I have no idea. I have a $20 copay to him, a $20 copay to the company that owns the building, so it costs me $40 every time I visit. Okay, how many times have you visited approximately? Probably 4 or 5, but it wasn't always just for that. I mean, I go in for checkups or whatever, and so when you say 4 to 5 times, you're not really referring to the Ativan issue. No. He would just ask me, how's it going? How's it going? Do you want a refill? And sometimes I would say yes, and sometimes I would say no. It would just depend on how it was going at the time. Did you see any other doctors than Greenlee? I'm sorry? Any other doctors than Greenlee saw by you? Yeah, I had to see my cardiologist in Maysville. Why did you see your cardiologist? Just the stress was causing me to have a lot of chest pains. Did he have you do a stress test? Yes, he did. I was concerned that I may be having another heart attack, and they did the stress test, and his exact words were, "You need to get away from there." What was his name, the doctor in Maysville? I keep getting him confused with my daughter's doctor. I don't know. He works for Ohio Valley Heart. I'll think of it in a minute. Have you got a copy of all those medical records from your doctors? I don't. He does. When you say he does, who do you mean? The doctor would have them. I never asked for copies of the... Okay. Have you seen any therapists or counselors? No. Okay. Have you missed any days of work? Yeah, there was a couple of days that I stayed home with my daughters. They would be off work. They would be upset. So I would just take a sick day or So you took a sick day to sort of stay with them and keep them calm? Yeah, or just took a day off. I mean, it's really up to me when I work. So you're not taking... Because remember, he's like part-time. So as long as they're not really short-handed or doing something exciting like raiding Afroman's house. But there's been days that I'd intended on working, especially my youngest daughter. She would work third shift. She would come home just absolutely distraught, and I'd say, I'll just stay off work with you, because she'd be afraid somebody's going to come in and kill her while she's trying to sleep. I'm going to ask you a stupid question, Shawn. If she's so distraught over this, why isn't she a party to the lawsuit? That I don't know. Okay, so when we talk about damages, are you referring to her or just her or you? Oh, and you, or just you by yourself? My whole family. And that's including your 2 daughters. My wife, of course, Justin has got his lawsuit here as well. I mean, we've all went through this pure hell since this started. So you're also asking for damages due to reputational harm. How has this harmed your reputation? Well, like Justin testified earlier, you can go into a situation that would normally be calm and not eventful, and then you've got somebody, hey, there's this lemon pound cake, you dirty SOB. And then, oh, I know him, he's a racist, and he's this, that, and he's the other, which I'm not. And it made all of us look bad in some of the public's eyes, not all of them. So it would be a mixed bag, like Justin said, some people were supporting, some people weren't. Some people would come in and say, man, a great job what you did. You did what needs to be done cleaning Adams County up. And others would come in, well, you're a no good racist SOB and this, that, and the other. So not everything was negative? Not everything, no. So your reputational harm would be very similar to his. It just takes longer to do a clear scene. I've had, in 41 years of law enforcement, I've had a very good rapport with the public. It's just now starting to get back to where you can go out and talk to people, and they don't seem like they're afraid to talk to you, And like I said, everywhere you went, this nonsense followed you. Give me some examples of that. I can give you several examples, so here we go, chat. Once I was on Upper Churn Creek Road. And when was this? Oh, that would have been, I don't know, a year ago, 8 months ago, something of that nature. So roughly the end of 2024. So this is after the lawsuit's filed. Yeah, in the middle of somewhere around there. I had a warrant on a gentleman. He was in the back bedroom of this trailer. I'm talking to I don't know if it was his wife or his girlfriend. She tells him, hey, they're there with a warrant. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And he's hollering at me through the door. I've got a deputy outside watching the window so he don't go out. He said, I'm putting my shoes on, I'll be right there, compliant as he could be. Opens the door, and pardon my language, but he said, where's the fucking pound cake? And it was on. Oh, I didn't read this example. The example I read is on the next page, I think. What do you mean by it was on? He started screaming and yelling and cussing and carrying on. The other deputy had to run in, back me up. I had another one where I was just, I'll tell you just the ones I can remember. I had one at the Marathon Station in Seaman. I was with my wife. I was off duty. We stopped in. I went in to get me a pop. There was a young boy standing near the back door, and he starts, hey, you racist, no good blankety blank, and pound cake this, and pound cake that. So I went after him. I was going to arrest him. You were off duty? It doesn't matter. I can still make an arrest off duty. I can detain him until the deputies get there. But anyway, he runs and jumps in a car, and he's going down the road flipping me off. Hey, you no good, blank, 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 and this and that and the other. Another one I was at. I want to go back to the Seaman. What would you have arrested this man for? And remember, David Osborne used to be a prosecutor. He says, disorderly conduct. Cussing and screaming and causing a scene in front of a bunch of people. He had the people at the counter scared to death. A minor misdemeanor? Disorderly conduct? It would have been persistent disorderly if I'd arrested him. If I went outside and it continued, yes. So you admit that you would have went after him, but you would have had to have give him orders to cease and desist, and he'd have to persist for it to be PDC, persistent disorderly conduct. Yes, right. But there again, did you tell him to stop? I didn't get a chance to tell him anything. He had started screaming and yelling and takes off the back door and jumps in a car and takes off. In the state of Ohio, can you arrest a person for a minor misdemeanor? No, but persistent is a first-degree misdemeanor. You can only be arrested for persistent. You cannot be arrested for disorderly conduct. Okay, so when you took after him, you hadn't told him to desist? You were going to arrest him on a minor misdemeanor? If he would have continued. You said you took off after him and he took off running. When did you tell him to stop? No, he took off out the back door and I went out. Just out in pursuit after him. He's not running. He's not running. Pound cake is not running. He jumped in the car and took off. I was going to tell him to calm it down, that's enough. Shawn, if he's running away, why would you be chasing him to tell him that? It wasn't a foot chase. He takes off out the back door, so I walked across the store and go out the back door and he's already taken off. It wasn't like I was chasing him down. But there again, you asked for an example of some of this nonsense I went through. This is some of it. You know I had... And then David cuts him off. I'm not so sure, Shawn. I'll be honest, this is troubling to me. But I'm going to leave it and let's go to another example because I'm troubled by this example. Okay, you want another example? I want another one, yes. The apartments in Seaman. Is that Shady Meadows? And then Lisa Phillips says, I'm not sure if he was in Seaman. And then the witness, or Seaman, I mean Seaman. I went to Seaman. I believe it's Shady Meadows' apartment. And when was this? This would have been back early winter, probably. Of 2024? Yeah. This stuff just, it flares up, and it goes down, it flares, and then okay. It just depends on what kind of things he puts on the internet tonight or tomorrow. I go up there to handle a complaint on a neighbor putting something in the hallway that the other neighbor didn't like. It's kind of, I don't want to say a handicap, but anyway... There's a guy standing there working on his truck, and I get out of the cruiser. I walk up, I talk to these people, I settled the complaint. I start back to my car, and then he starts. Who starts? The guy standing there in front of the truck just starts. Was this guy part of the complaint you settled? No, it had nothing to do with it. Okay. If I remember right, he was calling me a racist, and we had no business doing this, and we had no business doing that, and he started this pound cake stuff. And I told him, I said that's enough, and he shut up. After that, he never... Okay. But that's just 3 examples. Well, I'll give you another example. A better one than that. I was working. I can't really get into the details, but I was working a huge theft case. If it's something we can't get on the details, it's probable best we don't use it then because I don't... Well, no, I want you to know how far this goes. So he really thinks that these are great examples. So he says, well, I want you to know, and Osborne says, yes, but I'm going to ask questions. I don't want to interfere with an investigation. He says, no, you're fine. You're okay. Okay. Anyway, I end up at the sheriff's department that is all of the way on the Pennsylvania border of Ohio, following up on a criminal case that I'm working with some other agencies. The sheriff there is showing me his sheriff's department, a very nice fellow. We walk by the squad room where there's 3 or 4 deputies in there. Now, this is several hours away. Oh, God. One of the deputies walked out and said, hey, are you from Adams County? And I said, yes. Do you live in Pound Cake? And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. He thinks this is going to be a better example, and all of it is another law enforcement officer making a pound cake joke. They said, an officer asked you that. A deputy sheriff asked me that. They sure did, and then asked me for my autograph. Well, I'm sorry, isn't that kind of like a joking endearment? Did you give it to him? No, I didn't give it to him. So they got under your skin. Because if you laugh about this and you go, here, bro, that's one thing. If you get all sourpuss and you're like, no, man, what are you doing, Esme? What do you mean pound cake? Now they're going to make fun of you more. And it's if they weren't laughing at you, because they might have been laughing with you. If they weren't laughing at you, now they will. They say, do you remember the deputy's name? I don't even know who they are. So this may sound stupid. Getting asked for your autograph, how is that a bad thing? Well, would you like to be called Fatty? And if I walked up and said, hey, Fatty, give me your, it's an insult. We're going to get to that, calling names and stuff. But, so you took it as an insult that he asked for. It isn't, well, no. They thought it was funny, To them, it's a joke. Here's this deputy from Adams County that everybody's making fun of on the internet. And no, I didn't think it was humorous at all. So how is this different than when Donald Trump, president, refers to Joe Biden as Sleepy Joe. Well, that's between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. That's got nothing to do with me and my family. Do you think that former President Biden could sue Donald Trump for those statements? I have no idea. I don't know what the federal statute says on something like that. How is that? I would be sure that if Donald Trump said, hey, I made millions of dollars off of what I said about it, sure, I would think he could. He would be able to sue him. Who would ever said that they made millions of dollars? Your client has. Your client has bragged many times about how many millions of dollars he's made off of us. And it's on the internet. We have copies of all of us. When did you first become aware of what was on the internet? It was probably within a week of doing the search warrant. Okay, how did you become aware of it? Describe the process. And before we go on to this, because that seems to be where the examples end, he promised better examples that would show all of the nonsense he has to deal with in the course of his work. It's debilitating his life. And his example is another person asked him if the town he was from was called Pound Cake, which isn't even a good joke. But anyway, they're going to make fun of him, of his own doing, because he can't be a good sport about it, like Afroman can. And, Afroman could be a sport about things that are much worse than a joke. And at the beginning of this deposition, we go through this whole ordeal with how they interview or whatever they don't interview, because they are being all mealy-mouthed about how they're describing the process of talking with Tasha Chamblin. And she says she took it upon herself to take these bags of weed that are supposed to belong to Afroman. And she's in possession of these weeds. It would be a third-degree felony amount. And they don't have a case file on her. They don't want to arrest her. Just nothing. But yet they want to arrest somebody for calling you a pound cake, a racist pound cake at a gas station while you're off duty, who leaves and gets in their car and drives away. You won't arrest the woman who says that she took that weed that supposedly belongs to somebody else and is currently in possession of it. Not to mention potentially lying. But you want to arrest somebody for calling you names. And then you want to sue somebody for speaking on the way your department acts. I think we need more commentary. So, and again, I know this case is over, but when I tell you, I only read that one example. That had me amped all the way up this morning. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is why we need to speak on this type of behavior. Because why should we have somebody trying to show their gamesmanship? He was volunteering this information. Well, I knew I couldn't arrest him on just a misdemeanor. So I was gonna, pretend I was already trying to pursue him for an arrest. And was he just going to call it persistent without actually seeing if it was, just so he could make the arrest on the spot, if he could catch up to the guy? It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Just crazy. And I see, did the cops have to pay for Afroman's attorney's fees? I mean, maybe we'll see some filings where the parties might ask for that, but the judgment entry just says court costs, which are things like the court fines, the stenographer. I don't know if some of these deposition fees are paid for by the parties themselves or if they're involving staff from the court and that there's court fees associated with these depositions, but things like that. So I'd imagine it's not just chump change. I would imagine it's probably in the thousands, but maybe not like six figures, but maybe a couple thousand, 10,000, maybe less than 10,000. I think it's probably more than a nominal amount, like a couple $100 though. So, because again, some jurisdictions also, I think, like jury compensation can become part of the court fees. So, and I really don't know the specifics of this court because it can vary. Let's see. Yeah, and as far as an appeal, if they're going to appeal, we'll know because we'll see a notice of an appeal on the docket. So, and according to the Watchdog Wire, he spoke with one of the plaintiffs, and it seemed to be a guy because I think he said he. It was like he told me. But Watchdog Wire said at the time that he spoke to one of the plaintiffs after the verdict came down, that particular plaintiff said he doesn't have plans to pursue an appeal, which of course could change. But that's at least one saying, like, look, let me just take the L. Let me just take the L. Oh, man. So, and Don't F with Justice says he went on Ativan for this. I actually don't know what that treats. I mean, I kind of just, like, to me, it's kind of irrelevant. Like, all right, you went to a doctor, you paid a $40 copay. What are the economic damages here? So, yes, and shout out to the Loophole Lawyer as well. Come hang out with us tomorrow at 5 p.m. The stream is pinned at the top of this chat, and it'll be in the Creator Friends playlist in the description as well. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a fun time. I can get all the anger off my chest reading this with you guys today, and tomorrow it can be all jokes. Jokes that we can laugh at, like good sports. All right, so we've got, let's see. When did you first become aware of what was on the internet? Well, it was probably within a week of doing the search warrant. Okay, how did you become aware of it? Describe the process. Well, I think the first one was when Sergeant Phillips told me. So that's Lisa Phillips. She was very distraught over some of the things that he had said about her on the internet. And I don't look at it. I don't read it. My wife don't read it. My family don't read it. It's just all a bunch of nonsense. But you hear about it no matter what you do. You go somewhere. Hey, did you hear about him putting a new song on about you? You know, I've got one of his t-shirts, you know. It's got my picture on. Oh, it's got my picture on it. He made millions of dollars off of them, supposedly. That's why we have a lawsuit. They genuinely believe. I don't think they genuinely even believe the things that are out here. That we have some testimony. Oh, that's just his opinion. But I truly believe they think he made millions off these t-shirts. So Osborne says, what commercial interest do you have in your image? Apparently millions of dollars worth, according to your client. Okay, but if I asked you, not taking into account anything he said, your answer would be you don't know. I'm not sure what you're asking. Maybe it's supposed to be if I took your picture and put it on a t-shirt and went out on the front yard starting to sell it, discounting Mr. Foreman, would anybody buy it? It depends on what the advertisement was to it, I would assume. But whatever you made off of me, you made off of my image. Have you ever been photographed for the newspaper? Sure. In 41 years, you haven't been in the newspaper at least once? Oh, I'm sure I have, but they've never sold pictures of me to anybody. But you would admit that they put your picture in there to sell newspapers? Now, the times it would be in there would be in something that had to do with the sheriff's department, but this is all about your raid with the sheriff's department, where we called the news media and said, hey, we did this, we did that, we did the other. No, they never took a picture of me and put on there, look how fat this guy is, or something of that nature, being derogatory towards me. No. Okay, Shawn, I don't mean to be derogatory when I say this, but you admit, well, strike that. What is your weight? Right now, 242. Did you ever come in contact with the money as it was counted from the search? The only time that I seen the money was when it was laying on the kitchen table, because he was standing near that damn pound cake. Well, it may not have been on the table, it may have been on the bar, but somebody laid it there and said, hey, keep an eye on this. I sat there and talked to Mr. Foreman's wife, and then one of the detectives, it might have been the detective, come up and got it. And when I seen it, it was already in an evidence bag, so as far as loose money, no. So you saw the money in an evidence bag, and you were just making sure it didn't disappear. Yeah, just walked in and said, hey, watch this for a minute. They were doing something else, and how many evidence bags were there? I don't remember. I think just one. Okay. Do you follow South Park at all? I don't even know what South Park is. If I told you they just released an episode where they started talking about Donald Trump having a small penis, would you admit that it is derogatory towards Donald Trump? And then Mr. Mosier objects. Object, speculative, but go ahead. I wonder how they knew that. Okay, I like that answer. Because how do you prove it? Is it verifiable or not? Okay, I like that answer. But you would agree that could cause him some harm and issues. He's married. I mean, unless he's out fooling around on his wife, who would care? Okay, what training have you received in relation to citizen? And this is just making me think of the whole Lisa claims. Like, why would anybody care? Why would anybody take offense to that? Well, your co-plaintiff is claiming that she was harmed by a social media post that said, you better check if she has a penis before she whips out something that's bigger than yours. But Lisa's had a family. Lisa has kids. So apply the same logic. You have your own co-plaintiff, like, saying why the principle of your case is nonsensical. So he says, yeah, we go through training and search and seizure rights. You're right. Due process, processing due rights violations. I mean, yeah, it's continuing ed. That's part of it usually. Is there a written policy on how to handle money that is taken as evidence in a search? There was when I retired. It wasn't specific to money, but one person would do the evidence intake. Back then, it would have been the evidence custodian. Now, our evidence custodian does not go to the scene with us most of the time. Well, maybe they should. So in the event that the evidence custodian wouldn't have been available back then, it could be, what's her name, Cheryl McCullum? She's the evidence custodian for that one town in Georgia. So in the event that the evidence custodian wouldn't have been available back then, there would have been one person, Hapesville, I think is the town, that would take in the evidence. Okay. And they would be responsible to make sure that it made it to the evidence room. Okay, so one person would count the money, seal it in a bag, and take it to the evidence room, along with all the evidence. I mean, let's say, for example, there's a loaded gun sitting there, or a gun. Maybe a loaded gun or the firearms person. They may unload it, but the deputies would photograph it, and they'd say, okay, we've got this gun laying here. Well, then whoever's collecting the evidence would go over, they would take the gun, put it in a box, put all the information on it, then it would go, they would collect all the evidence. That way you don't have evidence in the trunk of 3 or 4 different cruisers. But that was back before I retired, so other than the other officers in this case, who else would you be calling as a witness at trial? Who would I be calling as a witness? It wouldn't be any of my family because I wouldn't put them through it. It would probably just be the officers here. Okay, are you planning on calling your doctor to testify, Dr. Greenlee? No. Do you have any experts that you're going to call at trial? That would be up to our attorney. What kind of resolution would you like to see for this case? That would again be up to our attorney. So are you saying if your attorney told you to dismiss this case, you would be okay with that? I would think he would have to have good cause to do it. Okay. Now, one of the resolutions that I would like to see is Mr. Foreman taking down his gate with my image painted on it, along with 2 hookers. Okay, so I was looking for a snippet earlier and just happened to see a quick picture of this gate. And I'm sure I could go get a better picture, but he was asked a bunch of questions about how he had an artist who designed this gate, and they were basically saying, well, you paid more to get the gate replaced. And this is some of it. So there is Shawn Cooley memorialized on the gate work. I think it's wonderful. So he says, now one of the resolutions that I would like to see is Mr. Foreman taking down his gate with my image painted on it, along with 2 hookers. Why do you call them hookers? Well, you can tell by looking at them. I mean, I've been in law enforcement 41 years. Okay. And the rhetoric to stop on the internet. Okay. There was a demand for $810,000. What share of that would have went to you? I have no idea. Okay. So how much do you put as your reputational harm? Put a dollar figure on it. Well, I can't put a dollar figure on it. That would be up to, you have deputies like Sergeant Phillips that went through a lot more turmoil than you might say than me, along with Detective Newland. And what would you put as a dollar figure on the emotional distress? There again, that would be up to the attorney. Okay, how would you figure a number to give them? I wouldn't. I would depend on him to get that number. How would he get that number? You know more about that than I do. I'm not an attorney. Okay. How much have you paid your attorney to date in attorney's fees? I'm getting ready to pay him here as soon as we leave again, so I don't know. I owe him money right now, so I have to pay him when we leave the building. Would it be more than $1,000, less than $1,000? I have no idea. More than $100? Oh, it's more than $100, yeah. Okay, more than $1,000? I don't remember what the first payment was. Okay, my wife pays the bills, so I tell her we owe this and she writes the checks and, sounds like a smart man. If I'd signed my own check, they'd sent it back. Tell you your signature was fake? Absolutely. But the person to ask would, and they're just joking here, but the person to ask that would be your attorney, Bob? Yeah, he would be the one I would depend on for that, yes. You've also asked for damages in relation to humiliation. If you put a dollar amount figure on that, what would that be? There again, that would be up to the attorney. Okay, being as you've seen the doctor in relation to obviously your work and the stress you have going out on calls, have you made any claims at the Bureau of Workers' Comp on that? No, and let me clarify something. I didn't go to the doctor just because of this. Um, this was something that was brought up. Well, at least every 6 months, I have a checkup with my doctor because I'm getting up there in years, and I brought this up to him, what had happened, and this and that and the other. And he prescribed it, you know. So you didn't go to the doctor specifically because of a need for Ativan? No, I did not. I don't like to take them, but no, I did not. So when we were talking about copays and damages, you were already going to the doctor at that time? An initial visit, yes, and most of them were just regular doctor's appointments. There's some, they can't refill that until you come in and see them. So you have to make an appointment to come in, and they count the pill count and make sure you're not a drug addict. And of course, that costs you out of pocket. Have you seen any doctor specifically and only for your your physiological reaction to the stress that you've been experiencing due to these posts? No. And when we talk about missing work, have you put in any claims to the Bureaus of Worker Comp for that? No. I have no time to take off. So if my daughter was upset and didn't feel safe, I would just call in and say, I'm not coming in today, and I would stay home so she could go to bed and get some sleep. And so that would be for whatever reason. If she had a boyfriend stalking her, you would take a day off for that. Well, she's never had a boyfriend stalker. But if she did, though, she never had. The only problem she's had is your client. Okay. And then Mr. Osborne says, if we can take a minute, please. And then I have no further questions for Shawn Cooley at this time. And none of the other attorneys have questions. So that is the end of the deposition of Shawn Cooley. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Not a single one of these alleged threats was pursued. And again, they didn't bring anything in a trial that shows these business records with these calls. Like, not only should some of these calls to the dispatch center just be logged because they're always logged, but we've heard that the sheriff started having them tally and categorize these calls and keep track of them. So that would be another type of written record. Why don't we have that? Anyway, I think this is more garbage than I even knew when I was watching the trial. I mean, in these depositions, we have everybody saying, oh, that's just his opinion. Oh, well, I wasn't going to the doctor because of this. I was going there anyway, and then I said, give me some pills. And we find out more about this stupid search warrant. The affidavit itself, there's problems within the affidavit. But then you get the surrounding context through this deposition. And we haven't read Brian Newland's yet. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow before the panel show. I'll do a stream earlier in the day. We'll be teed up. We'll know more about Brian Newland and what he says about this confidential informant tomorrow. How do the orders go? Hold on. Because the next set of depositions, this set with Justin Cooley, Michael, and Shawn Cooley, and then the second one from Afroman were all on August 6th, 2025, and then there's another 4 2 days later on the 8th. And those, who went first? So Sean Grooms was at 11:30 in the morning. All right, Randy Walters, wife guy, is going to be the first one up next. How long is this? Maybe we can just do this. Oh, this one's long. This one's kind of long. I'm going to go to the index on his and see how many times his wife mentioned for Randy. The warrant. Oh, wife is mentioned quite a few times on this one. So we'll start off with his. Sorry. Let's just do it now. Let me take a drink. Because I want to get to the questions about the wife. So we're going to do Randy Walters' deposition. All right, here's a better window. Let's see. And again, this is now on the 8th. This is the first one of the day. Present, we have both of the, we have Sarah McElroy for the counterclaim instead of Attorney Mosier. And we have Afroman's here, Sean Grooms is here, Lisa Phillips here, Brian Newland, Shawn Cooley. All right. Let me actually put the body cam on for you guys for a minute. There isn't much left in my cup. It's like melted ice water. So I'm going to fill that up and be right back in like a minute. I'll put on the body cam. You guys can watch a little Afroman raid body cam. We'll take a little concession break, comfort break. And then we'll read this with Mr. Randy. Oh, and the Watchdog Wire has... It looks like he went to an Afroman show. It says Westside Tavern Afroman. And the preview looks like he's out. So he went and saw one of Afroman's shows yesterday. Where is the body cam? Body cam. All right, so I'm just starting it where we recently left off. Put some captions on, and I'll be back in like a minute or two with a refill.
Big 8-foot room that's missing.
Oh, it's just how it's shaped, maybe.
Oh, it's a space in between the buildings. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's the connecting right there.
Yeah. He said that's it. Besides the one, I mean, you can keep it open. We may need to. You like that birthday cake I made you? Did you like the birthday cake I made you?
Called in by her boyfriend. Richard Holsinger showed up drunk. We were arguing.
I forgot. I bought you some ice cream and I forgot to send it over. But you got the cake. Got the cake.
Man, keep it in
Where'd you get that? That's mine.
Oh no,
Yes,
I've had
it
this
is.
for I don't know how long.
I
It
can
came
tell
from
you.
my car, old buddy.
Yeah, because it came
And
from
I
mine.
ain't giving it
Because
back.
it came from mine.
I ain't giving it back.
$356,000 last year.
Well, you know what? She said he's been looking into because they're costs. Maybe he's stashing stuff out away from the house.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna be on tour for 2 months.
Yeah.
He asked Brian what he wants to do with that. It needs to be sealed if we're keeping it around the house.
Okay. That cash on the table, are you sealing it up or?
Probably, yeah.
All right.
Just save me time, Walters, because he already looked.
I appreciate it.
He said he's gonna keep it, I guess.
Who is Brian?
Mhm.
Okay, have him sealed then, so it's sealed.
Okay.
They're keeping the $4,390.
I don't know. I don't have any tape to seal it, but Randy told me to give it to you. That way it's with you, I guess.
From years ago, they still owe us $67,000.
So, you want to ask Brian if there's anywhere else we need to go and then work on.
Where's Brian up there?
No, he's in the office here. Yeah. Well, my camera's about to die. Man, we still have to work all night. We still have to work all night. I'm gonna shut mine down. I'm gonna just, well, we got what came out 21, 24, 21, 24, 21, 24, me and Grimm. I charged this damn thing up. Well, we just started in here, started right here in this corner. Fix my belt key. Can you check that up there, the totes there in the corner? And, okay.
That's magazines. I'm not sure what's in there.
I don't know either. I don't even know how to get into that thing. This is back up. Where at, Lisa? Oh, okay. No, everybody we got's up that way.
I don't like that. My kids are home and I'm not there.
I don't know how you get into that thing, Sean. Looks like bottom of it lifts and things there. Raise up something. There we go. I lifted it. Hasn't. Is that what we got to do? Nothing. Oh, Kenny, how's the 2 jobs going, bro? Huh? I mean,
3 here lately.
it has been, ain't it? It's old after a while, I can tell you. Other things in them shirts and stuff. And hats. Yeah, all hats. Lots of hats. What we doing now? This one's done. I don't know if everything up to us is done or not.
That one?
I ain't been in, I don't know. I mean, I just picked this one right here and where we ended up at. Cooley, you been in it? In this? Yep. Brandon might have been in that one. Brando, was you in the one next to us right here? This one right here. Right here.
They just come in from grass and
Well, what is the rest of these done, Kenny, up to here?
And they still haven't found anything.
They're all done up to here?
All right, so let's get to this deposition of wife guy, because that's just going to be his name. So, oh, this is the other one. All right. Randy Walters, aka SOB. So they go through all of the basics, they explain the rules. He says he remembers how they work. You know, the whole, if we need to ask a question, we want you to finish it before we take a break. And then we get, this is Osborne. So now it's my understanding you're on duty right now. Yes. So he's there in his uniform on the clock. Okay, and so your cell phone may go off during this and we may have to terminate this early. Yes, we'll try to avoid that at all costs, but, well, we hope to, but I just want to get it on the record. So this may sound stupid, Randy, but how are you employed? Well, with the Adams County Sheriff's Office as a police officer. Okay, and what are your duties as a police officer? So I'm assigned primarily to road patrol as a supervisor, although I take a lot of roles in the sheriff's office, between investigations, maintenance concerns, staffing concerns. The sergeants take a very administrative role in the sheriff's office, so mine's everything you can imagine at the sheriff's office. So you're currently a sergeant? Yes. Okay, when were you promoted to sergeant? That I couldn't tell you. The date of this incident, I was a sergeant. So in 2022, you were a sergeant? Yes. Okay, so you were promoted sometime prior to August of 2022? Yes. Okay, maybe I should answer also. That's another thing. She can't type when we both talk at the same time. So they want to make sure the court reporter can get all of this riveting testimony down. And let me, since I don't have his picture up, we can make this a little bit better positioned. Maybe. There we go. I think a bit easier to read. All right, so she can't type when we both talk at the same time. I apologize. So I'll wait till you're done. If you could wait till I'm done, thank you. How long have you been a police officer? I started the police academy in 1997. I graduated in early of 1998. Okay, was your job with the Adams County Sheriff's Office? No, it was not. Where was it? My commission was through Higginsport Police Department. I was there briefly just as a beginning job. Advanced, just, you know, when you first start out, especially back then, it's a lot different than it is now. There was a lot of police officers. I went from there to, I think, Peebles Police Department part-time. Didn't really go full-time until I landed at Manchester. Okay, and when did you land in Manchester? Early 2001, 2000 or 2001. Was that before or after they disbanded? And it was after. Okay, and it was the same for Higginsport when they disbanded their police department. I wasn't there. I wasn't there then. I was only there as a commissioned through the academy. And I worked there afterwards for a brief period of time. That was away from home, so it is a little ways from here. Okay, so how long were you with Manchester? Manchester, probably 2009 or 10. Did you leave Manchester to come to Adams County? I actually went to Peebles Police Department. The same thing, looking for a full-time, job. I took a very small break between Manchester and Peebles, and then was hired full-time for the sheriff's office. Okay, do you remember when this was? Somewhere in 2010, 2011. So you've been with Adams County Sheriff's Office for roughly 15 years. Yes. And you've been a sergeant with them for at least 3 years. Oh, yes. So you say sergeants are kind of like the people that do all of the administrative and kind of keep it running? Yes. So you mentioned being commissioned through the academy. What academy did you attend? Brown County Police Academy. This may sound like a stupid question, but did you graduate there? Yes. Are you a fully licensed certified peace officer in the state of Ohio? Yes, and instructor. And instructor. When did you become an instructor? I started 2 years ago formally doing instruction. Mine is based in firearms. How does one become an instructor in firearms? Be selected by your agency to go to instructor school. So about 2 years ago, you were selected and you went to school for that? Yep. And what school did you attend for that? The first one, Great Oaks. It's all APOTA. That's like the Ohio Police Officer Training Academy through their course study. Is there a physical location for that? That one was Great Oaks in Cincinnati. I think it actually might be Westchester. Okay, is that the only place you attended for that? No, I went to Hocking Hills this year to further that. So we've learned previously that an officer must keep up with continuing education. Is there special continuing education to be a firearms instructor? You have to do courses. Basically, you have to qualify your agency and keep up your agency. You have to do so many in your training cycle. As of yet, they haven't done continuing ed for the instructors on that. Are you up to date on your CLEs? Yes. And when I say CLEs, you know what I'm referring to. The credit hours, we call it CPT. Oh, CPT? Yeah, what does Continuing Professional Training? And that's set by the Ohio AG's office. It is set by the Attorney General and the Steering Committee for Law Enforcement. And you're up to date on those hours? Yes. Okay, if I wanted to see a list of all of the CPTs that you've completed, where would I go to find that? You can get that through the AG's website. So they keep a list of what everybody took? Yep. They have a public portal. Now, to clarify there, I'm trying to think. There are some classes that we take that aren't through APOTA, just special instruction. We took a leadership school that wasn't put on APOTA, and so that's something that would be within the agency. Because not everything that we take is straight from the AG's office. There's a lot of training that you take that is something the agency wants you to take and comes from another source that's not necessarily regulated by the AG's office, but it's still training that is for the advancement. So just for me to clarify that. So would the AG's website still have those classes? No. Okay, so the AG's website would only have APOTA classes. Yes. Okay, so if, for example, the police department wanted to go to a team building exercise, would that be considered CPTs? No. So you would be referring to things that's not considered CPTs but is still training? Yes. Okay. Does the Adams County Sheriff's Office have a written policy on confidential informants? As far as that, I'm not aware if they do. That's not something that I utilize in my job very often, to be very honest with you. I don't know what the policy is on it. When you say it's not something you utilize a lot, what do you mean? I don't do narcotics investigations generally. I mean, I have done them, but usually I'm support staff in those, and I'm not the narcotics guy. So you don't deal with confidential informants a lot? Not very often. When do you think the last time you dealt with a CI was? Last year. So did you have to complete a confidential informant packet? I was assisted in it. It was a CI that I sourced out of an incident and was assisted by Deputy Cooley in it. For sake of our argument, we have 2 Deputy Coolies, so which are you referring to? Justin. Okay, he helped you complete the packet and do everything? Oh, and I don't think I ever saved my screen, so sorry if it's been kind of weird. Right? Go to the other layout. Single camera. There we go. So he helped you complete the packet and do everything? He did that part. He did the paperwork part? Yeah. So it's fair to say you don't do a lot of work with CIs. Not really, no. How does one become a confidential informant? Can you explain that process for us? Yeah, my understanding is it's a person that's sourced that has information to a particular situation, incident, or something that's going on, and their information is utilized to further the investigation. What do you mean sourced? What does that mean? Either somebody that comes forward or somebody that is sourced from interactions with the sheriff's office. So like if you ran into someone at a scene and they said they had more, that would be an example of sourcing. It could be, yes. Would sourcing also cover something like, let's say you stop me for a speeding ticket and I ask, hey, can I get out of the speeding ticket? Oh yeah, tell me something about this drug dealer. Well, that's not really how I perform the duties, but that could be one way. It also can be somebody that calls in information and doesn't want to, sort of like a civilian? Yes. Is there a policy on how to deal with a CI who might be facing criminal charges? It's not something that I deal with, so I couldn't tell you. I haven't myself personally seen a written policy on that. Is there a written policy on how to complete a search warrant and return on a search warrant with the sheriff's department? Not that I'm aware of. Okay, how does one learn about how to do a search warrant? The way I learned, and which is with other investigators and also contacting the court and asking them what they want on a return, how they want to handle it, because they're the ones obviously filing the warrant and categorizing it when you bring it back. So my use of search warrants and returns has been coordinated with the courts and through the prosecutor's office, how they want to handle it. But there was no additional training in reference to how to survive a Franks hearing or anything, not that I'm aware of. Do you recall taking any continuing education classes in the last 4 years in relation to search warrants? Yes. Tell me about some of those classes. This year I took a T3 class at APOTA pertaining to search warrants and the use of them. Obviously, the T3 is a little bit more advanced. It's probably the most advanced course that APOTA has for search warrants. And then, prior to that, I took a class in Hamilton Township. I think it was in Claremont County. It was Claremont, I think. Hamilton and Claremont for a search and Caesar class. Caesar salad. So, in your understanding, what should be in a search warrant? Detailed information as to the crime that is alleged or thought to be committed, the persons involved, and the area and the scope in which the search will be conducted. So I want to break that down. When you say the crime's alleged, tell me more about that. Because this is what I use search warrants for the most probably. Doing a homicide investigation, obviously you have your charge. If you have a person that's dead, your initial charge is going to be murder or some type of homicide crime. So you're looking for any evidence in relation to that crime and where they may be located. Okay, and so you would detail the crime. In that case, it would be something like a homicide. You would give a brief, but the wording on it obviously is pretty precise. But it's a brief overview of what we've got. On this date and this time, we responded to a scene, found this, and we believe there may be evidence contained or information to further the investigation in this location. We would like to have a search of this location, do further investigation, have probable cause to believe there's items located there in relationship to the crime that we're investigating. Okay, so that's the info on the crime charge and the place in which you would search for it. Yes. And when you say scope, that's what you're looking for? Well, scope would be, if I'm asking to look for a body, it's hard to look in a dresser drawer, or a small container for a body, unless you're looking for parts. That's indicated in the warrant what you're looking for. And the scope of your search is determined by the items in which you're looking for, the size of them, and where they would reasonably be located. Okay, so the scope would be tailored to depending on whether you thought the homicide, the person had tried to dispose of the body by, cutting it or buried it in the backyard. Also, for clarity on that, if I'm looking for a suspect in a homicide of a shooting, I would indicate in the warrant also that I was thinking this. I would indicate in the warrant that we're also looking for firearms, ammunition, shell casings, or projectiles, things that are smaller. So that expands the area of search immensely because those items can be concealed in very small places. So the scope tells where you can search and what you can look for. Yes. Okay, and that's you've been trained on, and there's no policy dictating to the officer how to write that up. Not to write warrants, no, not that I'm aware of. This may sound stupid, but you would be aware if there is one because you're a sergeant dealing with the paperwork. So I think it's been previously discussed. The policy and procedures are in the process of updating, partially because the previous policy and procedures that was given to us, there's no reasonable way when you're given a policy and procedure. It's like the RC, There's a lot of sections of the RC you don't use, and there's sections that you do. We don't, So there was just so much that needed to be simplified, and that's what they're in the process of doing now. If there is a policy on it, I have not personally seen it, even though I may have been given a list of policies that was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things, some of which is not relevant to my duties. So that's why they're trying to simplify it. So when you would say simplify, are they taking things out of like the employee's handbook that talks about terrorism and stuff like that? Not that I'm aware of. I think simplification of it is it is a digital platform that is more user-friendly for the end user, and anybody else for that matter. Before in the policy and procedure, it's just like going in the ORC. The ORC, if you're looking for traffic, you go to the 45 section. You know that. This I think is going to be more digital to where if you're wanting to look up something on search and seizures, you can enter that into the system and find all of the policies relevant to the topic in which you're dealing with. So they're simplifying it more into a search database. Yes, and upgrading all of the policies. Okay, was this something started by the new sheriff? It was something that was started by the old sheriff. It's just getting implemented. And again, the same issue. You're going from a big category and you may still have quite a bit, but to go through each of these to make sure they're relevant, working with our legal teams, and the prosecutors, and making sure everything is relevant and current to case law and as things change. And that's the other reason for updating these. The company which we're using, Lexipol, that's what they do, is policies and procedures for law enforcement agencies for others. So if a new case law comes out, we get that updated in our policies as it comes out, not just somebody saying, oh, I just read this new case law and we probably need to check our policies. This is something that we're doing to make sure everything is in line with the law and the current case law. Let me ask a question on that. So you're not getting feedback from the prosecutor's office asking you guys to change policies as they win and lose cases in court. Oh, yes. Tell me about that. As far as, well, so what kind of feedback do you guys get from them? Well, we have a daily relationship with the prosecutor's office. So there's a meeting every day with at least one of the staff? I would say every day that I work between Monday and Friday, I have a meeting with somebody from the prosecutor's office in some form or another, whether it be cases or in general investigative. Have you ever had any meetings with the prosecutor's office in relation to this case? It's not my case, nope. What do you mean it's not your case? I was an assistant on that case. I did no investigations into that case. Okay, and when I say that case, you're referring to the search of Mr. Foreman's home? Yes, sir. So you may have already explained this, but just to recap for me, what is the standard procedure on how to get a search warrant? A standard procedure is, if you're investigating a crime where you believe that a search warrant is needed, you run it through your supervisor of what you have and what you're looking for. And then, with a supervisor generally, with me, if one of my people come to me and say, hey, here's what I got. Do you think we should get a search warrant to complete the task at hand? I'll review the case with them. We'll go over it. We may have conversations with the prosecutor or one of his people on our situation. And then we start drafting a search warrant. Uh-oh. If we feel like that's needed or not, and go through the process. Once it's drafted, the prosecutor, one of the attorneys will look at the search warrant, and then we take it to the court and file it. So a prosecutor reviews the search warrant prior. I take mine to the prosecutor for review, and I'm pretty sure that's pretty standard. I don't think it's necessary, but that's something that I do. Best practices idea? Yes. Okay. Although in that sometimes that's not available. As police officers, we can write our own search warrants and apply for it through the court. Okay. So the best practice would be to run it past the prosecutor's office and everything, and have the supervisor look at it. Everybody make sure it's good? Yes. And then present it to the court. However, that's not necessary. That's just the best practice. It's my best practice. I would like you to take a look at what's been marked as Plaintiffs Exhibit 8. Have you seen that document before? If I have, I'm sure I've seen it. I don't know that I've ever reviewed it. Again, like I said, it's not my case. So would this be the first time you're truly reviewing it today? If you want me to thoroughly read through it, I can. I don't know that I ever have in the past. Well, were you on duty on October 21st, 2022? I was called in. You were called in. Were you off duty that day? Yes. Do you remember when you were called in? I'm sorry, I do not. After lunch? Oh, yes. Was it dark out? No. So sometime between dusk and after lunch. Was it your regularly scheduled time off? I believe so, yes. Which, that's really not easy to say at the sheriff's office because your time off is mostly going to be spent dealing with something from the sheriff's office. So it's common to get called in? Very. So you were called in. Do you remember that phone call? Not really. So when they call you in, do they just tell you why they're calling you in or just say, hey, we need you? As I recall, I was contacted, I believe, by Sergeant Newland, saying that they had a search warrant that they needed assistance with and to see if I was going to be available. Okay, so you arrived at the police station. What happened next? I was kind informally briefed that we would be doing a search warrant for a marijuana, possibly some type of human trafficking, and the location in which it was going to be to try to come up with an operational game plan. What operational game plan was developed? With the resources that we had, trying to sort out a way in which to make access to the property and secure the property for preservation of evidence and safety. Okay, do you remember how many officers you guys had? I don't remember the exact number, but it was 10 or less. But definitely over 6? I believe so, yes. What was your role at the scene? Just one of the people securing the scene. When we get a search warrant, one of the things that needs to be accomplished is security and safety. And security means everything from the security of the people involved, the people at the residence, or the location and preservation of evidence and people absconding or hindering us in finding the evidence. So, were you part of the breaching team? Yes. Okay, who all was on the breaching team? I couldn't tell you. I was on the Shield. I believe David Russell was also on it. Deputy Shawn Cooley, as I remember, but after that, I don't know. How many people were on the team? That I couldn't tell you. How many people are usually on the breaching team? Well, that never happens, but you'd like to have enough people to successfully secure the location. It depends on the size. If we're needing to secure this room, 2 people can do it effectively. If we needed to secure the whole building, the way that you work in entry, sometimes people have to hold a location while you clear another location, and then that can happen multiple times. It's very dependent on the size of the structure. And that's one of the things that I do is develop game plans, which never go as planned. That's Murphy's Law, that, you can see the floor plan of a house and say, we're going to do this. And then we get there, things happen. So when you were developing this, where did you review the floor plan of Mr. Foreman's residence? I did not have a floor plan of the residence. Why not? That was not available. Well, you said you usually review that and plan. How do you normally find the floor plan? If you have it. So that's only if you have it? Yes. And what does not happen? That does not happen on a regular basis. Okay, because they would have seen that there was no basement. Okay, so when you say shield, you were on the shield. What does that mean? It's a ballistic shield. Could you describe what that means? It's a shield that is made of bulletproof materials that is designed to help protect people in situations where there's possibly going to be. It's just a thing. It's just like wearing a bulletproof vest. It's made with the same materials, but it's something that, when you're doing entries or if you're dealing with a situation, that it provides an extra level of safety. So I imagine then, you're the first one going through with the shield in case someone shot. It would deflect the blast? Yes. I'm going to try to go through detail on how this door is breached. Which door did you guys start to breach? There were 2 doors. There was like an outer door and then an inner residential door. Why did you choose the side door versus the back door, which is glass? I don't recall why that decision was made. Did you make that decision? I don't recall if I did or not. Okay, do you recall knowing even the composition of the back door? I'm really not for sure what knowledge I had at the time. It doesn't stick in my mind exact details, but again, I've done entries into hundreds of locations in my career. How many entries have you made since 2022? With my job that I'm assigned to? A lot. I'm part of a fugitive team, and that's what we do. So it's very common to breach residents? Very. Not just here, though. I'm not saying in Adams County. That's not extremely common in Adams County, but in my other job task it is. In the fugitive team? Yes. So I guess I need clarification. Is the fugitive team just Adams County, or is it a larger area? It's the Southern Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team through the United States Marshal Service. So it would cover multiple counties in Ohio? Everything from the Southern District of Ohio, so Franklin County South. Okay, or just above Franklin County South. Yeah, you're right, the line is just above Franklin. And then there's a affirmative head shake. Basically anything in the Southern District. Yes. Okay, so we're going back to August 21st of 2022. You're looking at the door. Obviously, if you're holding the shield, you're not the one with the battering ram? Yes. I would imagine that you had an officer with the battering ram. They would step out once the door was down and you went in? Yes. So we've got, let's see, scroll. Who had the battering ram? I think Deputy Russell, but again, I'm not 100% sure. So what happened after Deputy Russell started to bash the door? Once the door was breached, we made entry into the location and secured it. So you went through only one door? No, there was 2 doors, and I'm not sure if the first door was secured or not. Again, I know the interior door was breached. So when we're talking about breaching, you're just referring to the interior door that went into the kitchen? Yeah, that's the only one I know for sure. The outer door, I can't honestly sit here and tell you how that was gained, if it was unlocked or how it was. Okay, after you make entrance into the kitchen, what happened next? We conducted a search for persons, a safety search. It's called a primary search of the residence and area. So basically sweeping the rooms, looking behind doors, making sure no one's hiding? Yes. Was anybody found? No. What did the house look like when you made entry? A typical structure. The one thing I note that heightened our senses a little bit, and it's been made light of numerous times, that nobody gets the full story of, is we come into our primary breach point into the kitchen dining room area. Immediately observed next to the lemon pound cake was an empty gun holster. As police officers and as common people, you understand that when you see an empty gun holster, there's generally a firearm present, which wasn't. So that was something that caught everybody in the stack's attention, that there was an empty holster, not just the deputy wanting some pound cake. And when you're saying deputy wanting pound cake, who are you referring to? Shawn Cooley. So everybody calls him that. So when you come in and notice this empty gun holster in the kitchen, where was it in reference to the door as you came in? Directly in front of the door that we came in. There's a small island between, or countertop. The holster was sitting under a glass pedestal holding, I guess, a lemon pound cake. I don't know. I didn't try it. I don't like them. But the holster was directly underneath of that, which would have been approximately 12 feet from the door that we made entry. It was the first area we came to. So you would have made entry, went past the kitchen table, the back door to the island. As you come in front, the breach point, there is a counter that comes off from our right, and it goes out to probably half, 3/4 of the room. There was a table, as I remember, to the left, and there was an island that's in the kitchen area itself. That's where the holster would have been located. So everybody sees this item. It's called out. Called out? It's when you see something like that, you call it out. What do you mean by call out? You mean you make sure that the rest of your team understands what's going on. So you would have yelled, "Watch out!" Well, verbalized. He corrects and says verbalized. There's an empty holster on the counter. Okay, so you tell them what you found. Yes. Okay, did you wear a body cam when you breached? Yes. So that would be on your body cam? Yes. Is there a written policy with the Adams County Sheriff's Office in relation to body cams? Yes. And what's that policy? Without being verbatim, the gist of it, whenever possible, body cam must be used. Anytime a body cam is not available or not used, it needs to be notated in CAD or some form. Notated that there's times that when you'll be docking your body cam and something will occur that you have to run out, whatever. And when an officer doesn't have their body cam, they generally notify dispatch, negative on body cam. It's either in download or whatever the situation. Or sometimes if you get called out, that may be the last thing on your mind. I got called the other night for a hostage situation, getting dressed at 1 a.m, the last thing on your mind is, better make sure I have my body cam, because that, ever though important, so that does occur sometimes. There was some reference to a CAD log. Would that be in a CAD log? If somebody called it out, yes, they would log that. Okay, so if you arrived at the scene and forgot your body cam, you would tell dispatch through the radio, say, "Hey, I forgot my body cam," and they would log it in the system. If they weren't aware, yes. Okay, if they weren't aware? If they weren't already aware already. Who wouldn't be aware? If dispatch or your direct supervisor wasn't aware, I still make it a purpose, even if one of my people tell me they don't have their body cam, I make it my rule, it's not written down, that I notify dispatch and say, hey, whatever doesn't have their body cam in some dock or whatever. So I think they're talking about how Cooley just borrowed Shawn's body cam. So after moving from the kitchen, where did you go next to secure it? So as far as I remember, our team somewhere along the line, when you have different areas of coverage, a group of people, I believe, went to the left that would have pertained to going upstairs and securing that. I remember mainly controlling the downstairs area of the residence. So you would have searched the rooms off the kitchen, the living room? Yes. Bedroom, basement? Yes. I don't believe I was ever in the basement. Actually, I don't know. I don't remember anything with a basement. Do you ever remember seeing a basement? Not that I recall. Do you ever remember seeing any cages? Not that I recall. So just to clarify, you had nothing to do with the preparation of the search warrant for that residence. Nothing. You never interacted with the confidential informant? Never. So you secured the downstairs. Did you secure it by yourself, or did you have an individual help you? Well, there would have been a couple of us, and to be very clear about it, I couldn't tell you exactly who was with me. So you secured the downstairs, the secondary team did the upstairs? Yes, sir. How long did it take to secure the residence? In the 10-minute mark, it could be more. So 10 minutes plus or minus? Yes. Where was this handgun found? I didn't find a handgun. So there was never a handgun found in relation to the empty holster? If someone found a handgun, I did not find a handgun. If you find evidence like a handgun, how would you deal with that? I'm not trying to be difficult, but that is a very, very broad question. Okay, so let's go back to the hypothetical of the homicide case we talked about. You're searching the residence, you find a firearm, you believe it's part of the crime, you're wanting to preserve it as evidence. What's the next step for you? Well, whenever practical, you would photograph it as is, whenever practical, and that's not always the case. You would notate serial numbers, description, things like that. And then for a firearm, you would secure it and make sure that it's safe, clear it of ammunition, and categorize it into the evidence found. Okay, so if you had cash that was found as evidence, how would that be cataloged and logged? It would be logged in which and where it was found, photographed, and then counted and secured. And when you say secured, do you mean put in evidence bags with them sealed? Yes. And then those evidence bags would be monitored until they're turned over to the evidence locker? Yes. And when I say the evidence locker, would that be fair to say turning it over to D? Yes. And then Afroman joins the deposition. So David Osborne says, and she would monitor it from there? Yes. So after the house is secured, what did you do next? Just assisted. Everybody had an area of coverage, during the search of where to go. My area and the people that I was with was off the kitchen on the first floor. Did you find anything that you cataloged as evidence off the kitchen? I believe in one of the rooms down the hallway, there was a vape was found, something of that nature. I don't remember it being very fruitful in locating anything that was of evidentiary value. There was a jar, like a cookie jar, a glass jar full of what looked to be marijuana that was found in a room just off the kitchen. If I remember right, it had a bunch of ball caps or something like that in it. And then there was a jar of marijuana found in there. A bunch of what? Ball caps, like jersey ball caps, as I remember, like you wear on your head. Oh, like you wear on your head? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I was thinking bottle caps. No, I mean, there may have been, I don't know. Okay, and you catalog that as evidence? So anything that was found in our area was placed in a certain area, and then it would be the investigator's responsibility to anything that was taken. They would apply that through the search warrant, return, and seize it. The investigator's responsibility. So who was the sole investigator for this case? In this operation, I believe Sergeant Newland. You refer to him as Sergeant Newland. Is he a sergeant or a detective in this case? Both. Explain that to me. You can be a sergeant and be a detective. Generally, every division has supervisors in it, and so he would have been a supervisor then of the detectives as a sergeant. Yes, some agencies you can't be a detective unless you're a supervisor. By default, they're already a supervisor. So, well, strike that. That seems like a college course. So after everything is put in the area for the investigator to tag and pull together, what happened next? Continued to search the property, including outbuildings, and at some point in the search, Mr. Foreman's wife or ex-wife, I don't know, I know at one point it was his wife, was on the scene and was talking to Sergeant Newland. I know Angie, and I've talked to her many times in the past. I talked to her and was explaining to her also what was going on. At one point during the investigation, or during the search, it was brought up that her residence is just next door, and that her kids were there, and there was somebody in the driveway, which is kind of concerning because, it was alleged that we were scaring the kids. As far as I know, I'm the person that had contact, or was even in close proximity with the kids, and that was because Miss Foreman was scared because somebody pulled in the driveway. And I dropped everything I was doing and went next door and checked on the kids and talked to another family member to make sure that they were okay. And as far as I know, that's the only interaction that night. And I didn't see the children. I just went to the residence where they were to make sure they were okay, because that was very much a priority. Okay, so was that after you finished searching and everything? I think it was the after the primary search was done. Yes. Was things wrapping up by the time you came back? Yeah, I think it was. Okay, now there's been some mention of a security system. Do you know if there was a security system at the residence? A security camera system? Yes. Tell me about that system. So it's not uncommon in an investigation of this nature, if you come across a security, If your thought process and you have cause to believe that something is going on and there is a security camera system, there's a good chance that may be captured in the system. So it was determined that the system needed to be taken as evidence. And then later, they don't take it. And then later, if we would get a security camera system, that would be in the scope of your warrant, you can take that. And then later, you would apply for a search warrant for the contents of it. The system was unhooked for evidential purposes, and I was not aware until a couple of days later that it was not actually seized under the search warrant. It was left on the property. But the intent, when it was unhooked, it was because that would have evidential value and would be taken and then a search warrant later to search it. So how did you guys determine it would have evidentiary value? Through conversations at the scene. I couldn't tell you exactly when or where those took place, but it's kind of a standard thing. If you're looking for activity that occurred at a location and it's under surveillance, obviously, that surveillance system could be of evidential value. So you didn't know that the search warrant noted that it had been a month since the CI had been there? I know nothing. I did not review the search warrant. It was not my investigation. Okay, so the security system was unhooked for evidentiary purposes? To seize was my understanding. Was there any other evidence seized at the scene? I believe there was. Do you recall any of it? I didn't do that, so I couldn't tell you honestly what was seized and what wasn't seized. Okay, my role was limited. I want to go back to the security system. How is the security system taken to be as evidence? I mean, it was mounted to the wall, had wires coming out. Who cut the wires? I don't know that anybody cut the wires. I believe they were unhooked. I do know at one point that Sergeant Phillips obtained a Leatherman tool from me to unscrew something, a bracket or something, so it wouldn't cause damage. Okay, so the bracket that was holding it to the wall was unscrewed? Something was, but I know nothing was cut as far as I know. And so it was to be unhooked to be taken as evidence? Yes. Okay, did you take any photos of the scene? There was numerous photos taken of the scene. What I took, it's been a while, like I said. This was not my investigation. It would be standard if pictures need to be taken. Usually when we search a room for pictures are taken of the room as it's found, and then you start doing the work. Do you ever recall photographing any papers taped to the wall? Probably. I don't know specifics. Okay, so where would these photos be found now? I'm assuming in the case file. If I was to do a public records request for this case file, what would I ask for specifically that the prosecutor's office, when reviewing, would know what I'm looking for? I don't do public records requests. I don't know. It depends on what you're looking for. Okay. I fulfill them when we get, people above us saying, hey, this request has come in, we'll provide body cam when we can. But a lot of that is determined if it's something that can be released. It depends on where you're at in an investigation and how it serves an investigation. Is this search warrant still under investigation? I don't know. Again, it's not my investigation. So it'd be Brian Newland's investigation? I don't know. He's not with us any longer. I have not been hands-on in this investigation and have no clue. When they create case files, do they create them for the event or for the person? It depends. Okay, on what? I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, but if I'm working on a burglary from like 3 houses, that could be 3 separate reports, or it can be combined as 1 report with 3 victims and 3 locations. It just really depends. Okay. And I don't know that there's really a standard. It's just the feel of each investigation. What would be the best practice in doing that? Did you take place in any of the search of any of the suits or anything? My time upstairs was very limited. I do know that I went upstairs, but it was very limited. I don't recall searching any of the suits. Was your time upstairs before or after you talked to Miss Foreman and went and checked on the children? I couldn't tell you. Do you remember how long everybody was at the scene? A couple of hours, as I remember, give or take. It wasn't an extreme amount of time, but it wasn't really, really quick either. Did you take any, or were you involved in the attempt to breach the front door? The attempt to breach the front door. He says, not as I recall. Being the shield man, wouldn't you have been involved in that if they were attempting to breach it? I don't recall the front door being the primary point of entry for us. Do you guys ever breach more than 1 location at a time? It depends on the situation and the residents and the information that you have. So remember, Justin Cooley is like trying to kick down the front door. So do you guys have policies on this, or are you just all willy-nilly? So he says, I don't recall. Well, who would have made that decision? The way generally things are done, everybody has a voice in this, when you're talking about entries and stuff like this. So ultimately, whoever is in charge of the operation would make this final say, but everybody that's involved has a say in, trying to determine the best way to do something. So it's kind of like a collective. One person's in charge, so you can comment on all of them. If it's kind of like a collective, it makes sense why somebody would comment on all of them. So it's kind of like a collective. One person is in charge, that makes the decision, but he polls everybody first? Yes. Who was in charge of this? My understanding, Sergeant Newland. So Brian Newland was the person over everything. He briefed everybody, and you guys then gave your input and a plan was developed? Yes. So after the search was completed, what did you do next? Spoke with Miss Foreman. I spoke to Mr. Foreman on the phone. He had some concerns of what was going on, and I tried to assure him on a phone call that, my understanding is they needed to talk to him. I think there were some concerns about, us coming and looking for him. I told him that's not the case at this point. Make contact with us. I know Sergeant Newland would like to speak with you. And honestly, at that point, my job was, as far as searching, was over. So it's not my investigation. I honestly was trying to calm some of the fears of what's going on and what's next, because there was no arrest warrant for Mr. Foreman. There was, to my understanding, no intentions at that moment to get an arrest warrant for him. Obviously, they did want to talk to him, so I explained to him, you don't have to fear of looking over your shoulder. We know how to get a hold of you now, so that's what will occur. And that was, so they couldn't find another way to get a hold of him? This is dumb logic. And that was, I don't want somebody, I don't care who it is, the suspect of a crime or a general person. There's no reason to, bullcrap somebody or have them have a fear that they don't need to have. Oh my goodness. Good guy Randy here. So after concluding the conversations with Miss Foreman and Mr. Foreman, did you go back to the station or did you go home? I don't know if I went back to the station or not, to be honest. I really didn't have an investigative role, so I could see going straight home from that, because it's not something that I needed to, when you get called in a small agency, especially when you get called in to help with something, or hey, this is what we need from you. And honestly, sometimes it's a good role to have because, okay, this is what you need me to do. I'm out. Good to go. And you can move on to the next thing or deal with your own stuff. So after the search, you had really no interaction in the investigation? No. So when did you become first aware that there were posts? I'm not for sure exactly when, but it didn't take long. When you say long, can you put a time frame on that? No, it just wasn't an extreme amount of time. So when you say extreme, you mean weeks? Have a good one, Nick. Thanks for hanging out. When you say extreme, you mean weeks? I mean, say it was within a week or 2 weeks or something, as my recollection on it is yes. And tell me what you learned at that time. The way I found out about the post? Is when my daughter came home telling me about it, because apparently it was posted that Mr. Foreman had had sex with my wife, and all fine and dandy except for the fact my daughter is biracial. I adopted her and her two sisters. She was pretty upset because all of her friends at school were making fun of her because her dad's a racist, and apparently she's Mr. Foreman's child because he's saying he had sex with my wife. So the kids were, so he gets cut off. So David Osborne says, so the kids were, and he gets cut off and says, and what causes a lot of distress in this is that little girl has been with me since she was a couple months old. She came from a home, her and her sisters, that was very abusive to a loving home and a family that has cared for them. And obviously we're not in a very diverse community. One of the first experiences she's had with that, and it's devastating. Has she ever had any experiences from the Ku Klux Klan before? Is that a real question? Yes. I don't know. Do you know what the nearest lodge for the Ku Klux Klan? No, because it's not something I'd really like to deal with. The same as I'm not a racist. And it's pretty hard that now that when you deal with people, that's a common thought. So you have claimed damages in relation to your reputation. Can you please elaborate on how your reputation has been harmed? I wonder where I suspect that there's something somebody was told about, this isn't like the first horrible thing that somebody in the community has lodged at these kids in relation to the race of their adoptive parents. But they don't get into it because he just says, I don't know. And that's really unfortunate. But unfortunately, the relevance here would be it's not Afroman's fault that these types of unwarranted and distressing things are happening to you, if they're happening to you. So you've claimed damages in relation to your reputation. Can you please elaborate on how your reputation's been harmed? Oh, well, multiple events of where you're dealing with the public and it's automatically assumed you're going to steal their money, chase them into the woods to kill them, you're a racist, all of this stuff that's been alleged or fabricated in an attempt to do what? Can you give a specific example? When you're arresting somebody or even when you're going on a call, this is not specific. I tell people all of the time, we're not out here selling ice cream. A lot of times when you go to a call, you do the best you can with the facts that's presented, and you're not always going to make people happy. And when you don't tell somebody what they want to hear, it's automatically, and it was for a while, what are you going to do to me like you did Mr. Foreman or Afroman? And then you have to either do your best to look past that and like, listen, we're dealing with this. Oh no. And then it goes further. So it's nonstop. Plus the fear that's been generated from this. Well, not for nothing, I think it's part of the job that you need to be able to look past this sort of thing. Whether it's stemming from Afroman, whatever he's posting online, or somebody's just annoyed in the moment and lashing out like curse words, crass language at you. Like, seems like it's a necessary part of the job for you in general. Afroman removed from the context to be able to deal with this and do your job. So, and then he says, what fear? That causes the hundreds, if not thousands, I'm sure it's thousands, but I don't want to misspeak, of messages that we've received through our agency and online. That we, as a unit, we as an organization, coming from people that are calling our agency to talk about us, says we can't post a missing child without the harassment from the lies. It is bad that you can't look for a missing kid or get the public's help because of this. Wouldn't that raise more awareness if more people are commenting on the poster? And if nothing else, wouldn't that inspire more people to think, hey, we should also look extra hard for this child because we can't trust this office to be doing their jobs because they're too busy raiding Afroman's house and ignoring 4 different dispatch calls while they're there. So, I don't really know how that would hinder the awareness and potential, like, community efforts to find somebody. So they say death threats for the agency, plus the death threats. That's a problem. Death threats for the agency? Yes. Why are we here? Why are we here? You know, I worked night shift for a long time, and we are a rural community. You can't see everything coming and going. And there's different issues in urban communities. But when you can't sit to do paperwork because you're getting active threats from people for misinformation, it's taxing. We're already a target. The one thing I know, and I say this all the time, I will never ever do anything to violate somebody's rights because the second I do, it gives somebody permission to do it to me. I may lose a case because I'm not going to violate somebody. But then to have things said about you, to smear you, to get people so enraged over misinformation that they're sending messages to a police agency of how pigs should die, and then let alone the other things that this has sparked. So this is also speaking generally about a group of people. This isn't like a personal attack or putting one individual person in a false light. He says, you know, I had a dispatcher say, there's something that came in you need to see. It was a picture of what was supposed to be depicted of 2 police officers having anal sex, and the dispatch was so embarrassed to even say, hey, you need to look at this. And this was all fueled from lies. And it's very taxing. It's very mentally taxing. We have had enough, and that's my problem. So this guy has 2 problems. He's mad about Afroman saying he fucked his wife, and he's mad that some dispatcher said, hey, you gotta see this, and it's 2 officers doing it in the butt. like, what are we doing? What are we doing? This is why we're upset. And like a page and a half ago, he's like, I can give specific examples. And this is where we are. She says, okay, So out of these thousands of messages, was anybody prosecuted? I didn't handle that. To your knowledge, was anybody prosecuted? I didn't ask. Well, if I was concerned about safety, I'd be following up to like, hey, are you getting a move on this? And since we're also law enforcement, do you need us to send over any reports to add to your case file? So this is the same guy that said earlier, I talk to the prosecutor like every day, whether it's for a specific case or just like general investigative stuff. And I don't even get into the weeds. Like, which one is it? He says, I didn't ask. Okay. It's very emotional. It's very taxing. Have you seen a doctor in relation to this taxing? No. Get a cop to a doctor? That's... Pardon? I said, get a cop to a doctor? It's hard sometimes. Well, we just heard 2 other people say that they went to the doctor. We're supposed to be the people out here helping people, but it's taxing. It's taxing. It's taxing. Yes. So when you say taxing, stressful is what you mean by taxing. Yes. Being in a sense of alert. I've said this to people before. You can go to work and have a day where not much is going on. But at the end of the day, you're still wore out because when you come to this job, there's a level you need to be at. And then you have that even heightened because you're getting active messages over falsehoods. And it's like, it's very, very taxing on you. Were you ever involved in any of the discussions at the police department on how to deal with these calls? Nothing extremely formal, no. Anything informal? Just that they're coming in and they're going to try their best to document this and figure out the way to do it. Now, I can say that since then, a very taxing thing for us is trying to get the public information without turning it into a spectacle. You know, there's a lot of things that's a spectacle. But when your child is in danger, missing, and we're trying to get information, it just keeps going back to this relying on, we just want to help the missing children and we can't post it online. Sure. And I'm sure there's people in those comments like, hey, you're rattling off when this is a picture of a missing child. Like, maybe that's not the place to do this. I can picture this being on Facebook. And because people want to comment on this Adams County Sheriff's Office, when they do happen to post like a notice of a missing child, here's the picture, let us know if you see anything, I can picture them running that engagement up. And thus more people actually see this poster. So, and he keeps leaning on it. He keeps leaning on it. It's a very taxing thing for us is trying to get the public information without turning it into a spectacle. You know, there's a lot of things that's a spectacle. But when your child is in danger, missing, and we're trying to get the information out there, but all we get is, try looking at the pound cake store, try doing this, or you guys are nothing but racist. Okay? This is somebody's kid, and that's a problem. That's a problem. So now you're suing, your whole gripe here is just so selfless. So selfless. Like, come on. And then secondly, this started because you guys didn't vet the claims of a confidential informant who said that there was a juvenile being held hostage in somebody else's home. So you're mad that people are using a post that you make on social media that happens to be about a good cause to also come in with commentary about you. But it all started back because you guys put as part of the public record out there that you were looking at Afroman because you thought he was keeping kids hostage. Like, what are we doing? Yeah. Hey, Mintgasm. Yes, this is banana nut crazy. Yeah, Adventure Aaron, they could also just turn the comments off. Like, although, can they do that? Are there some things, like, I know, like, public officials, like, their official accounts can't do that? Can public agencies turn off comments? Or is that gonna become an issue? But what they can do is, whoever's in charge of running the social media, if you get tips, have that person relay it. Like, nobody needs to be sitting there and wallowing in their own self-pity because people voice themselves on a Facebook post. So, like, just a whole mess. Coretta says it didn't occur to them that being better police officers who know and follow policies and procedures would help. Yeah, maybe you should be open to the feedback. Created by EJF says, how many kids go missing there? maybe another good question. Because my suspicion is he's leaning on this as like he's trying to be overbearing on this crutch that he's trying to lean on and be like, woe is me, we're just trying to help the children. Where is it? Curious Light says, won't somebody please think of the children? But also, if there are actually, like, if this is a prevalent issue, God forbid, why in such a small county is this such a major issue? Oh! Adventure Inn says it's not illegal and it's not against policy as far as I know. My city's mayor has me blocked on Twitter. Oh boy. Is it their official account or their personal account? Because I believe there's been more than one scenario where it's not just like federal level, but also at the state level, where people have fought because they were blocked from interacting. And I think Twitter was always the example I saw. Interacting with this is the whatever of this. Because it's prohibiting participation in a public forum. It's like something that falls under First Amendment or state-related First Amendments, I assume. So, but it is a badge of honor either way. But yeah, wouldn't it be funny if you fight that and win? Let's see. And then Temp for Privacy says, looks like on their Facebook now that comments are off. Huh. So look at that. Look at that. Isn't that something? They learned. And all they're doing is silencing people's thoughts. So, crazy. Okay, this is a good point too from Adventure Aaron. It's both. I know people have sued for it, but now that people can see the tweets of people who have them blocked, I don't think it's a winnable claim because you are still able to express yourself. So, yeah, kind of a cool point. Like the tech has kind of added in a workaround that enables the expression. So, cool beans. Let's see. All right, he's leaning on this. He's like, oh, we can't post missing kids without, hey, did you check the pound cake store? He says, and I can tell you and I won't do anything different or allow any of my people, I don't care who it is, how many times I've dealt with them. We treat, and I will make sure people are treated the same. If Mr. Foreman today came in here and needed anything, I would do everything I can to help him. Anybody. Just this, inflating the situation for whatever gain. Hello, why are we here? Is this not what the lawsuit is? It is causing harm, emotional and otherwise. And then to get my kids, which causes me more stress. They've already been through enough. They've been thrown out by one family, and now they're in my family, and they're mine, and to have them come home because of this, it causes a lot of harm. So you mentioned emotional distress. Tell me more about what emotional distress means to you. It's hard to explain. There's just regular work stress, and then there's added stress. That's unnecessary. And this added stress, and this is added stress that's unnecessary, and unnecessary because of the reasons behind it. How many times is he going to say stress and unnecessary? I don't know what the motives are, but I can tell you the results. It's pretty damning to your reputation. I'm not a racist. I beg somebody to show me something I've done to be biased or against somebody, but to throw that out there to me is very damning. Is to be called a racist? Yes. The same as I wouldn't put up with it to anybody that did it towards my children. I despise it. It's something I learned firsthand in experiences I have. I know it's a real thing. I guarantee it's a real thing. It's something I felt before, and now to see it, it was never a factor, and now it is, and that is damning. I have experienced it. I'm a white guy. I have experienced it. I guarantee you it's something that I didn't understand until I experienced it. This is a lot. Like, he's just like rattling off. How was that? What was the experience? Uh-huh. Well, when I was on a mission trip to South Dakota to an Indian reservation, and I wish I had, like, you know, in movies when they start telling a flashback story, they put up, like, a fog cutaway. When I was on a mission trip to South Dakota to an Indian reservation, and I went in a store to get a soda. And why does everybody have a story about going in to get a soda? And felt like everybody in there was watching me. And at that moment, I understood a little bit more what people of color and other people feel sometimes, and it sucked because I was getting a soda. but everybody in there felt like was watching me because they were different than me. And I had to get in my mind like, is this real? So I get it. I do get it. But in my mind, I had to process. You're a guy getting a soda. You're not a guy doing anything any other way. And learning that experience has helped me further as a person understand that you deal with somebody because of their actions and what they're doing. It's not about what they look like. This has no play into my daily operation. And to be told that it has, or has been implied that it has, is very damning to my reputation. It's very damning to how I do things. And then Shawn Cooley walks in into the deposition. like what are we doing? Yeah, just use the drive-thru, bro. Like, just go through the drive-thru. If you can't handle this. This is crazy. He really, like, just imagine, like cinematic music playing behind him as he monologues this, just, like, so indignantly. So David Osborne's like, so when we talk about emotional distress, then we're talking about added unnecessary stress? Yes. In addition to normal work stress? Yes. Okay, how do you put a dollar amount on that? I don't know how you do because I don't think you can pay this problem away. Well, you've asked for damages. How would you figure your damages on this? Well, there's no way to really figure out the total of the damages. How would one go about it, do you think? I don't know. How do you forget something away? So I guess this needs a clarification then. Are you seeking damages only to yourself, or are you seeking damages to you and your family? I'm not going to put my family through further unnecessary trouble and displacement and harm by putting them in the middle of this, but it has caused me harm. And just, yeah, they should be involved in it. They're involved enough. They don't need more harm than what's already been caused. But they should be involved? I'm not putting my kids and my wife through that. Do you plan on calling them as witnesses at the trial? No, my wife and family are the most priority in my life, and to see them harmed is devastating in this manner. Because the same respect I gave Mr. Foreman's children, and I would do it tomorrow, was not forwarded to my kids, and that's devastating to me. And with the stopping of the post, that helps a lot, but they still get it, and it sucks. This may sound stupid, but you've been a police officer for how many years? 27. My house... Oh, wait. Out of 27 years, have you ever had a death threat before? My house was caught on fire when my daughter was 3 months old over a disorderly ticket, so it's real to me when people make threats towards me. While I was finishing the case file, somebody caught my house on fire at 3rd and Snelling Street, Manchester, Ohio, with my wife and infant daughter sleeping inside. I rolled up to the scene watching my wife throw pitchers of water on the side of my house over a $100 ticket. So yeah, death threats are real to me. What does this have to do with Afroman? Oh my god. I take it you've been slandered in the line of duty? Nothing to the level that we've got now, because usually your reputation is from how you treat people. I believe in treating people the way I'd want my family and me to be treated. So you want everybody to sue you? If you say something? Is that what we want? And that's how I try to do things. And as you progress in your career and you learn that more, that how you treat people, that's what you're known for. I have more people walk up to me that I've sent to prison that come back and say thank you than the people that I've cut their family out of a car crash or saved them or did CPR and saved them. I have more people that I've arrested come up to me and say thank you for how you handled the situation, the integrity, the compassion that you gave to that situation. David Osborne says, do you need a minute? He says, sorry. So would it be fair to say you have no idea how to put an economic value on your reputational harm? No. No idea how to put an emotional value on the emotional distress. No, to be honest, one of the mechanisms that's used in law enforcement is hide your emotional damage and try to move on. It's a very unfortunate fact of public safety that people do that, and it's very unsafe, but we're creatures that, deal with a lot of bad stuff. And I think there should be more resources available if somebody, especially somebody in charge with somebody else's safety in this type of capacity, is going through this type of thing. I think the resources should be there. I think, there should be time. If an officer needs time off to recover from a traumatic situation, I'm all for making that a possibility rather than Just put them out to somewhere else that might be the thing that tips them over the edge, because it's a lot to deal with. But I don't think this is, like, how is this in any way comparable to somebody setting your house on fire over a traffic ticket? What Afroman's saying, and that other people are saying because they think it's funny. So he says, to be honest, one of the mechanisms that's used in law enforcement is hide your emotional damage and try to move on. It's a very unfortunate fact of public safety that people do that, and it's very unsafe. But we're creatures that, deal with a lot of bad stuff. And that's fine when you're trying to save somebody, but it's not. The next little rock on the PTSD pile is not good when it's based upon somebody's ploy to direct attention away from them or to make a spectacle out of you through lies. You said PTSD pile. What is that? It's a reference to the amount of situations that officers and first responders have to deal with. It's a joke, and I apologize for using it. Oh, so you mean we shouldn't just picture a literal pile of PTSD? But we used to always say, you go to the next major thing, that there's another rock on the old PTSD pile. Because the average person builds, I think it's 2.3 traumatic experiences in their life, and the average public safety professional deals with hundreds in a career. And more added stress to it is not necessary. How do you measure your stress? I don't know that I can define that or explain the question, or an answer to the question. When you say added stress, I'm just wondering if we were to quantify how much added stress, how would we do that? I went from having some instances of acts towards us, as far as I explained to you before this event and after. Has been multiple events. Before you'd occasionally get a loudmouth drunk, I'm going to kick your butt. And then it turns into people literally sending messages about how they want to see you dead. And it wasn't necessarily the norm. You expect it could happen, but then when the frequency upticks because of a situation, it's pretty stressful. Well, this may sound like a stupid question, Randy, but is making a death threat to an officer a crime? It can be. What makes it a crime? If I made a death threat towards you, if I cause fear, that's aggravated menacing of bodily harm. But again, it's not my call to determine what gets charged or not. In my mind, any threats towards public safety, law enforcement, who are doing their job should be handled swiftly. But again, not so. So somebody makes a death threat. So somebody made a death threat to you, and you felt harmed. That is the definition of aggravated menacing? Well, I would want to read it before I said, hey, this is absolutely it. And which we do all of the time. My understanding of aggravated menacing would be to create a thought of substantial harm to another through a direct threat. So I'm thinking of the SpongeBob hall monitor, he's just standing there, menacingly. So other than the other officers in this case, do you plan to call any witnesses at trial? That's something I'd have to discuss with my attorney, and as of right now, I don't have anybody else. Would that also include expert witnesses? That would be a strategy between myself and my defense counsel. Defense counsel? For the counterclaim? And that's something I'm sure we would do. But as of today's date, you have no idea how to figure the damage that you're claiming. No, I don't know that. Is that an affirmative answer to the question or a negative answer? An answer would be, I don't know how to effectively resolve, if ever, the damage that's been caused. What resolution would you like to see in this case? I'm by nature not a spiteful person. I'm not a vindictive person. I'm not a person that holds grudges, or attempt not to be. I don't know what the resolution to this is. I'm also a very remorseful person, and there seems to be none in this for the things that has occurred. So I don't know the answer to that. You also asked for damages and attorney's fees. Do you know how much you spent in attorney's fees to date? I do not. Would that be something I would talk to your attorney about? If that's something that's within the bounds, any correspondence between me and my attorney, including financial, I do not want discussed unless it's something ordered by the court and it's within reason. Not to be a jerk about it, but obviously your interactions between you and your client, I don't want to intrude on, and would rather be true for me. Okay, you're suing for publicity given to private life. Can you explain that to me, how what you've described in damages to your reputation is publicity given to private life? I think the publication of this case has rejuvenated Mr. Foreman's... The publication of this case? Like the lawsuit? I think the publication of this case, maybe they mean the search warrant, has rejuvenated Mr. Foreman's career, and without it would not have been so. Although very talented and has his own business, this was used, in my belief, to further something. I don't know why it was done the way it was done, but to allege having sexual relations with my wife for what? That causes harm and damage to my children that they have to deal with at school, which also puts stress on me. Do I have to take my kids out of school? Do I have, this is my problem. My family should not be affected by this. And over what? What? My existence should not be used to further somebody's career. And to publish merchandise and songs with my likeness for your advancement, because I don't know what other advancement it would be if you're charging for this. Maybe to pay back for the damages you did. When you say likeness, to be fair, I don't think Randy Walters was present for Afroman's deposition. Remember we were reading who was present, and I think he was the missing name. So he might not have been sitting in to hear these Afroman say, I was selling merchandise to pay for the damage they did to my house when they threw a fake raid. When you say likeness, have you ever had your picture taken before? Yes. Have you ever had it in the newspaper? Yes. Did you ever sue the newspaper? Huh? Did you ever sue the newspaper? No. Is your profile on Facebook public or private? It's private, I believe. I don't know. I'm not a big social media guy. Okay. Do you ever post pictures on social media? I've never allowed my images to be used for public gain over lies. Are you aware that when you post a photograph on Facebook, it becomes the property of Facebook? Okay. Would that make you the proper party then to sue over your face photo if it was on Facebook? I believe if my photo was being used for inappropriate purposes or purposes not that I deem acceptable, as in the same process with Facebook, if somebody posts an image of you and you send a strike to it, that they will identify it and take it down. Is that a federal legal thing that they must do or a policy that they do as a company? I think it's called being human. What does false light mean to you? I have no deposition of, and then Osborne says if we may take a break. So they go off the record, they come back. So we're back on here, Randy. Just have a couple of questions to clear up. One of the things you asked about for damages in the complaint was due to humiliation. Can you tell me more about that, please? Or would that just be duplicative of what you've already told us? What I've already told you, the damage that I'm some sort of racist and I'm out violating people's rights, and that's the furthest from the truth. Okay, how would you put a dollar value on that? I don't know. Okay, are you suing in the capacity as a police officer or as an individual? An individual. Okay, so if I do a public records request for information on this, and obviously body cam footage, the confidential informant, Mr. Foreman, is there any ongoing investigations that would interfere with that? I have no clue on that. It's never been my investigation. I don't know the inner workings of it, to be honest with you. Have you ever reviewed any documents in relation to this prior today? I thought about this morning. No, I never reviewed the body cam. I never reviewed anything. It's not something that I've investigated. So I guess that begs the follow-up question. Is there documents that could have been reviewed? I don't know. I've never attempted to. Mr. Osborne, says I don't have any further questions for you, Randy. And then, yeah, and that's it. Nobody else has questions. So there we go. He has a longer index, I think, than some of the other ones. Because not too much of his was taken up by the actual deposition. He used a lot of words in his. Cool. Here we have a Zelda in the building. I love the name, love the video game. I discovered you today, and I think you're absolutely fantastic and amazing. Well, thanks for joining us live. Always cool when someone can make it in the chat. We've got Lemon Pound Cakes Win saying Randy Walters is SOB. Yes, another song to go check out on Afroman's channel. Get it stuck in your head. We've got Coretta saying that part of dealing with the job is seeing the point of view of the aggrieved citizen. These cops only have empathy for each other, but not for the person raided, whose money is missing, door broken. Well, I think there's an extra layer here, too, to build on this. Because, YouTube limits what you can put in one comment, right? So I'm going to stack on a layer. The idea that cops take pride in helping perfect victims. But when somebody might not be a perfect victim, you know, the pride, the hero story of helping them isn't necessarily there. And, you know, we see this officer who, quite frankly, he doesn't seem to be involved with the money, and he gave a multi-tool to Lisa, but it's not clear if he's the one that said, go cut the cameras or anything like that. But he's out here trying to volunteer all of these things that make him sound good, and he's super defiant about any type of accusation that paint him in a bad light in general. Not by Afroman, but his past experiences with being called a racist or, you know, maybe violating somebody's rights. He has a significant issue with those things. He says, I try not to harbor resentment, but it seems like he does. And I'm not saying it's not like human nature to like be upset that somebody thinks of you in a way that you don't think of yourself. But when we have somebody that might not be a perfect victim, when I'm in my doing my job as a police officer and somebody's not a perfect victim, do I put on the same type of cape to try to help them? Is it the same, we're just trying to help the missing children? Or my kids don't deserve this, and they you know, I don't want them to be made fun of at school. I don't think that really lines up with the First Amendment issue. I think it's a separate problem. But it's like they don't want to take up for the aggrieved citizens who might be less than perfect. So, yeah, EJF says I'm going to need Kat to narrate all the audiobooks I listen to now, thanks. Get your favorite children's book, we'll do a reading party. Yes, I agree. This is a great way to say it. In one sentence, mind you, much shorter and more concise than my wording. Empathy and compassion is not owed solely to saints. 100 and 1,000,000%. So, yeah, and don't F with Justice says it's hard when he thinks he's God. And it's weird because it seems like he has like a little bit of self-awareness. Like, out of the depositions we've read so far, he's got a little bit of self-awareness. And I started to wonder, like, is there a reason where they didn't want to bring Randy in so intimately into this confidential informant and the search warrant process? You know, did his peers think, well, if we bring it to Randy, maybe he'd call us out on some of this stuff? But then his hubris, his audacity, his maybe like somewhat of a godlike complex overrides. And it's like, it ends up being a net negative. Like, it's just so much pride with this guy that his hurt feelings override any possible self-awareness that he might have. His feelings get too hurt that one thing that he might think logically about just goes out the window. The ego. So, he could be there, but he's too prideful. Too prideful. That's the vibe I get from reading this deposition. In a slightly different, it just has a slightly different vibe than some of the other depositions. Again, because it seems like they didn't include him in, hey, we need you to go do this knock and talk. We want you to go in there after our audio and video, quote unquote, weren't working and re-ask these questions to this confidential informant, Tasha Chamblin, and then come out and help me while I type up the search warrant affidavit, and then proofread it just for spelling, even though the spelling issues aren't corrected in the affidavit. You know, it doesn't really seem like he was a part of that, and I have to wonder why, if he's the one that seems to be the fine-tooth comb, the guy that would probably redline something for inaccuracies, why they didn't go to him. But he said maybe he was off that day. So, and they were in a rush. They wanted that warrant signed right away. So there we go, you guys. This is all one big hot mess snowball. It hasn't gotten any better. And we still have, who do we have left? I think Shawn Grooms is next. Then Lisa Phillips, and then Brian Newland was the last deposition. So we still got those three to go through. Let's see. This is... Shawn Grooms is short. Even with an index, it's 16 pages. Lisa's 25 with an index. Oh my god, I'm scared to see what her index includes. Let's see if the word lick. Let's see. Yeah, we've got a few. We've got lick, licked, and licking coming up multiple times. So that'll be fun. Lots of instances of that in just 25 pages. And then Brian's was long. Brian's was very long. 63 pages. I think that's the longest one besides Afroman's first deposition. So if you want to look at the depositions that we already read, they're linked in the description. There's 2 parts. But yeah, maybe we could try to knock these out tomorrow morning sometime. I mean, I can only imagine Brian's is going to be interesting because he's the last one deposed. And as we've been going through this, you can kind of see David Osborne doing process of elimination. Well, you weren't the supervising investigator that was on command at the scene, and you weren't the one that prepared the affidavit, and who asked you to do this? Oh, it was Newland? And then he's last up at bat. So I think his is going to be much more interesting than I expected. And I'm looking forward to getting into that. Hopefully we can try to get that done tomorrow. Tomorrow night, you guys, panel show. It's pinned at the chat and should be in the Creator Friends playlist. And then as far as I know, everybody's doing the Kelsey Fitzsimmons trial. So we can do a redirect, go hang out with somebody that's covering that. I've obviously missed the last few hours, so I don't know exactly what's happening. Let's see. Customization. Let's see. We're just going to go with the first who pops up, so I don't have to pick too many choices. Or first that pops up, that's Kelsey Fitzsimmons. And for that, okay, a lot of people, we've got the dentist murder trial, the insulin murder trial, Judy Church trial, and then Kelsey here with Defense Diaries is the first Kelsey Fitzsimmons. So that's who we're going to redirect to. A lot of other trials happening that are not on my radar. I've been so absorbed in this. So there we go, you guys. Oh, and Nick Starro has it streaming with boosted sound. Let me get a link to that, because actually let me redirect there, because that way everybody goes somewhere where they can hear it. Nick Starro. So we'll go hang out there, check out another case, get a little bit away from the Afroman for a day, and we'll be back tomorrow with more Afroman, you guys. I hope everybody has a great rest of your Monday. Yeah, don't get into trouble. I think be nice to people, but don't ever think that, we shouldn't be allowed to speak out against public officials and what we think maybe their agency shouldn't be engaging in. It's a very important right that we have, and reading these depositions is only making that more clear. We saw somebody volunteering in a deposition under oath that they were ready to hogtail it out if they could to chase after a young boy who was hurling insults at him at a gas station when he went to get a soda, and that he wanted to arrest that person and knew it would have to be classified as persistent. So that way he could. Persistent disorderly conduct. That way he could justify doing an arrest on the spot. And he volunteered that he wanted to do so, even though the attorney questioning him, who used to be a prosecutor, and I'm pretty sure Shawn Cooley knew he was a prosecutor, was pushing back against that. He still maintained. And I think that's exactly why we have to understand it's so important that we can speak out on these things. And nobody should face gamesmanship for being arrested because they call a police officer a name based on what that police officer was said to have done during a search warrant. So, Barbara wants to go through the Justin Timberlake body cam videos. If you send me down a Sag Harbor DUI, it might open an old can of worms for a certain other case that we've talked about previously on this channel. So, I'll think about it, Barbara, but no promises. All right, you guys, and Aaron posted the link here for Nick's stream. Also, Defense Diaries was streaming. I know Justice Serve TV, Michael Bryant is down there in person. So if you're interested in getting the vibe of what's going on in the courtroom, I imagine they'll be live on their show at either 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern today to talk about, the inner room vibes, what it feels like in the room, what the judge is like over on Justice Serve TV as well. So there you go, you guys. I'm going to hit this end button and see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much.